Chapter 502. The sacred archer looked at Guhan, who was surrounded by the heroic spirits without saying a word. In his mind, Guhan was already a dead man. There had never been a sword-tier swordsman who could survive his golden snitch. Moreover, there were so many heroic spirits surrounding him. If the opponent's shield was broken, the swordsman's body would be chopped into pieces in less than a second. Unfortunately, Guhan was the main character. Others needed at least 2 seconds to change their sword scars, but Guhan didn't even need 0.1 seconds. The moment the shield was broken, Guhan placed his hand on the hilt of the Duyu sword, and a new shield appeared. In between, there was only a 0.1 second gap. This was also the strength of the yin-yang sword technique. The sword scars of the Duyu sword and the heavenly sword were linked together. There was no need to change the sword scars at all to freely choose between the Duyu sword and the heavenly sword. Therefore, when the sacred archer, who was a little tired from using the golden snitch, raised his head and saw the heroic spirits surrounding Guhan suddenly being overturned and torn into pieces by the sword chi that filled the sky, the sacred archer was stunned. Even if he didn't have any intelligence, he began to doubt this world. Was the sword-tier swordsman in front of him really a sword-tier swordsman? You asked for it. Dozens of Guhan's sword chi gushed out, instantly killing all the heroic spirits and heroic spirit swordsmen surrounding him. After having 14,000 quarks of sword essence, the sword chi of the abyss that required 100 quarks of sword essence was no longer a luxury for Guhan. Guhan could also release dozens of sword chi in one breath, instantly killing a large number of enemies. At a time that was unimaginable a few days ago, every sword chi of the abyss was extremely precious to Guhan, and he had to use it carefully. A mere 4,000 quarks of sword essence was not enough for Guhan to squander. Now, Guhan could finally experience the feeling of being a nouveau riche. However, Guhan didn't use dozens of sword chis just to experience the feeling of being a tycoon. The reason he did so was to quickly clear out the melee warriors blocking his way and open up a path to the archer sage. The heroic spirit archer saint's golden snitch was indeed a very powerful skill. If it wasn't for Guhan's yin-yang sword art, then Guhan would have most likely turned into minced meat. Although the golden snitch was strong, its weakness was also very obvious. Just like now, after using the golden snitch, the heroic spirit archer saint fell into a period of weakness because using the golden snitch required a lot of energy. According to the information of the predecessors, after using the golden snitch, the heroic spirit archer saint should be weakened for at least 10 seconds. During this period, whether it was attack speed, movement speed, or hit rate, the heroic spirit archer saint would be greatly weakened. It was even worse than the soul grade Yuan Ku. This gave Guhan the best chance to win, within 10 seconds, as long as Guhan could get close to the heroic spirit archer saint and seriously injure him within 10 seconds, the heroic spirit archer saint would only have a dead end. Seeing Guhan get up from the ground and rush toward him, the heroic spirit archer saint immediately reacted and understood what Guhan wanted to do. In these 10 seconds, he could not let Guhan get close to him. 0 second, Guhan shot dozens of sword auras from the ground, killing all the spirits that surrounded him. 1st second, Guhan stood up from the ground and began to charge toward the heroic spirit archer saint. 2nd second, 10 heroic spirit sorcerers began to guide shaman witchcraft under the command of the heroic spirit archer saint. 3rd second, Guhan was 500 meters away from the heroic spirit archer saint. At the same time, the heroic spirit sorcerer saint began to chant a curse. 4th second, Guhan was 400 meters away from the heroic spirit archer saint. At this time, the heroic spirit sorcerer saint's shaman witchcraft had been guided. 10 shaman giants were summoned in front of Guhan. These shamans did not have high attack power, but their size and health were very high. They were the best way to stop Guhan. 5th second, Guhan was 300 meters away from the heroic spirit archer saint. Guhan used 9 blades of mysterious heaven, sword in the sky. This was a move that Guhan had used before in the hero's start from the beginning dungeon. This move could make the ground sink and create sharp spikes. It was the best way for Guhan to stop his enemies. At that time, he had trapped the 3 Egyptian gods underground for a while. As a result, The 10 shaman giants that were supposed to stop Guhan were stopped underground by Guhan. Meanwhile, Guhan stepped on the heads of the shaman giants and passed through the stone forest that he created. 6th second, Guhan was 200 meters away from the heroic spirit archer saint. At this time, the heroic spirit sorcerer saint was about to finish chanting. 7th second, Guhan was 100 meters away from the heroic spirit archer saint. The heroic spirit sorcerer saint had prepared a large-scale water spell, Deep Sea. This spell turned the ground under Guhan's feet into a lush green lake. With Guhan as the center, the dry rocky ground within 100 meters had actually turned into a pond. Just now, when Guhan used terrain swordsmanship to deal with the shaman giants, the heroic spirit sorcerer saint had actually thought so. What they had just used was the water spell Deep Sea. It could transform the terrain into the terrain that a mage wanted. Without the support of the ground, unless Guhan could fly, he would immediately sink into the pond. He wouldn't be able to take another step forward. In the 8th second, Guhan sank to the bottom of the lake. The heroic spirit archer saint let out a sigh of relief. As long as he had 2 more seconds, he would be able to recover most of his spirit. He would be able to use his invincible archery to teach Guhan a lesson. The remaining heroic spirit swordsmen and swordmasters would also be able to surround Guhan. At that time, the heroic spirit archer saint would be able to rest easy. In the 9th second, the hundreds of square meters of lake water disappeared. Guhan jumped up from the bottom of the lake and pointed his sword at the heroic spirit archer saint's forehead. At this time, Guhan was less than 10 meters away from the heroic spirit archer saint. In the 10th second, the heroic spirit archer saint hurriedly raised the bow in his hand. This was an ancient divine bow made from the bones and meridians of the ancient giants. It was extremely hard. Even if the nether rank Yuan Ku wanted to destroy this bow, he would need to spend several hours attacking it. As long as the heroic spirit archer saint could use this bow to block Guhan's sword, he would be able to hold on for 10 seconds. After recovering his speed, he would immediately be able to escape from Guhan's attack range. Fool, in close combat, your bow is useless. Guhan coldly snorted. The Duyu sword in his hand released a dazzling sword light. 9 swords of mysterious heaven, sword dipper. Guhan directly used his strongest single-target killing move. He also injected 9,000 quarks of his remaining 10,000 quarks into the Duyu sword. The sword dipper didn't have a fixed consumption of sword essence. As long as you put in more sword essence, it could cause more damage. In the blink of an eye, Guhan's Duyu sword passed through the gap between the bow and the arrow, directly stabbing into the heroic spirit archer saint's body from the forehead. The heroic spirit archer saint's eyeballs rolled up and turned white like a dead fish's. Then, as one of the 12 strongest heroic spirit warriors, the ultimate cannon fodder of the Norse gods, the nether rank Yuan Ku heroic spirit archer saint died under Guhan's Duyu sword. Brother Guhan, if we live together. If we die together. At this time, the sword-bearers who had returned to fight alongside Guhan also returned to the battlefield. As soon as they arrived, they saw a scene that they had never imagined. They imagined that Guhan was in a difficult battle, that Guhan was covered in wounds, and that Guhan had died under the siege of Yuan Ku. The best they could imagine was that Guhan was surrounded by a group of heroic spirits and retreated in an orderly manner. But they never imagined that Guhan would actually kill his way to the nether rank Yuan Ku, and that nether rank Yuan Ku was kneeling in front of Guhan like a slave. King. Seeing this scene, seeing the nether rank Yuan Ku kneeling in front of Guhan, and Guhan's sword pointing at the other party's body, P.S. Due to the angle, they couldn't see that Guhan's sword had pierced through Yuan Ku's forehead. They could only feel that Guhan's sword was pointing at the other party's body. Some of the sword-bearers could not help but spit out such words. In their eyes, the real Guhan was like a king, and the nether rank Yuan Ku kneeling in front of them was a stepping stone for the king to ascend to the throne. At that moment, the dimensional vortex appeared above Guhan. Only then did they realize that the nether rank Yuan Ku hadn't submitted to Guhan. Instead, he had died under Guhan's sword. Following that, Ji Yuhan quickly pulled out the Duyu sword and inserted it into the dimensional vortex. After absorbing the sword essence inside, He quickly sheathed it back into the scabbard and held the heaven-reliant sword in his hand again. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water. He did his best to prevent others from noticing that the sword in his hand was not heaven-reliant sword. Everyone, let's talk about our problems later. How about we eliminate the remaining Yuan Ku first? When Guhan saw the sword-bearers running back, he knew that they wanted to live and die with him. He couldn't help but feel touched. Unfortunately, now wasn't the time to chat. There were still dozens of Yuan Ku here, including 10 dragon-rank heroic spirit mags. If they weren't careful, these sword-bearers might die under the spells of the heroic spirit mags. In the next 10 minutes, Guhan fought the 10 heroic spirit mags alone, while the remaining sword-bearers killed the remaining Einherjars under Guiyi's command. Both sides cooperated very well. Finally, the Lonely Tower was completely cleared of the Yuan Ku defending it. This meant that Yuzhang City was once again in the hands of humans. Chapter 503. Guhan, it's great that you're all right. When all of the Yuan Kus were killed, Guiyi brought the swordsman to Guhan's side and met up with him. Boss Guhan, you're so awesome. How did you do it? Yeah, Boss Guhan, my heart almost jumped out of my chest when I saw you kill that nether-rank Yuan Ku. How did you do it? Boss, there's no need to say anything else. From now on, you're my boss. Please tell us the method you used to deal with Yuan Yang. These sword-bearers were all talking at once. The core of their conversation was to figure out how Ji Yuhan had killed this archer saint. But unknowingly, the way they addressed Guhan had changed many times, from Mr. Guhan to Comrade Guhan, then to Brother Guhan, and finally to Boss Guhan. Guhan was the youngest among them, but almost everyone called him boss so naturally. From this, it could be seen that Guhan's position in the team was completely different. Even to Guiyi, very few members would call him boss. Actually, the reason why Guhan was able to kill that nether-rank Yuan Ku so easily was mostly because the Holy Archer was courting death. Normally, the Holy Archer would constantly use ordinary white feather arrows to surround and kill Guhan, as well as the various skills of the Magisters and Wizards to exhaust Guhan. If that was the case, if Guhan wanted to win, he would have to summon 1 or 2 nether-rank Yuan Kus from the trial circle to help him. However, this Holy Archer felt good about himself and directly used his ultimate move, causing himself to enter a weakened state. This gave Guhan the opportunity to kill him in a short 10 seconds. This was something that the Holy Archer didn't expect even at the moment of his death. From this point of view, it was not unreasonable for Ultraman to save their ultimate move for the last big boss in anime, television, or novels. The one who used their ultimate move first would die first. Who knew who made this rule? Of course, Guhan couldn't tell these curious swordsmen about the real battle. This was because Guhan couldn't explain how he managed to change sword marks in a second, nor could he explain why he had 2 sword maidens, Duyu and Heaven Reliance. Fortunately, Guhan already knew that the swordsman would ask him this question, and had already prepared a perfect explanation. We're all smart people. I'm just a treasured sword wielder, how could I defeat a nether-rank Yuan Ku? Guhan smiled bitterly. His acting was perfect. To tell you the truth, I came back from the trial circle left behind by Zhetian Jendi. I obtained a few sword chi crystals left behind by His Majesty Zhetian in the trial circle. Just now, I used His Majesty Zhetian's sword chi to injure these Yuan Kus, and then took the opportunity to kill that nether-rank Yuan Ku. High-grade dimensional crystals had another use, and that was to store the sword chi left behind by one's master. Many high-level swordsmen would store the sword chi of their full-strength attack in dimensional crystals. As long as they used a special method, they could activate the sword chi and use it to kill enemies they couldn't handle. When everyone heard Guhan's explanation, they were instantly convinced. Although this explanation sounded a little far-fetched, compared to the fact that Guhan had killed a nether-rank Yuan Ku with his own strength as a treasured sword wielder, this explanation instantly became very reasonable. After all, no one would be willing to believe that a treasured sword wielder could defeat a nether-rank Yuan Ku with their own strength. This was too much of a blow to their self-esteem. However, if someone who was really familiar with the sword chi crystals was here, they would find that Guhan was simply spouting nonsense, because once the sword chi stored in the sword chi crystals was activated, it couldn't be controlled. The sword chi would attack wherever it wanted, and apart from the person who triggered it, everything else would be its target. This sword chi would twist the entire battlefield into a mess, and traces of sword chi attacks could be seen everywhere. However, on the battlefield now, apart from a few traces of sword chi, there were no other traces, especially the place where the holy archer had died. According to what Guhan had said, since that was where the sword chi had attacked the holy archer, it should naturally be the place with the most traces of sword chi. However, in reality, it was very clean, as if nothing had happened. Those who knew the ropes could tell at a glance that Guhan was lying. Unfortunately, there was no one there who knew the ropes, because the sword chi crystals were treasures of every family. They would only be used when the family was on the brink of death, or when the family's bloodline was in danger. Normally, they wouldn't even see a sword chi crystal, let alone use it. This was because making the sword chi crystals required high-quality dimensional crystals. They had to be at least a Marquise-grade dimensional crystal. Using such a precious dimensional crystal to store sword chi was too extravagant. Even Jendi wouldn't waste dimensional crystals to make too many. He would only leave some for his descendants to use for self-defense. So, this kind of thing was very rare. Most people wouldn't even see it, so they didn't know much about it. Just like that, the problem of Guhan's power was erased by Guhan's concealment of the sword chi crystals. However, everyone still called Guhan their boss. Even if Guhan didn't use his own power to defeat underworld-class Yuan Ku, it didn't matter. He had risked his life to face underworld-class Yuan Ku alone. That was why everyone was grateful to Guhan. 1, 2, 3, attack. Guhan gave the command, and all the sword maidens used their strongest attacks on the Lonely Tower. The body of the Lonely Tower trembled and cracks started to move upwards from the bottom. In the end, the entire Lonely Tower was completely shattered and turned into a pile of rubble. How is it? Can we get back in touch with Yuzhang City? The moment the Lonely Tower fell, Guhan projected his personal terminal into the air. He chose to reset the network connection. So, under the watchful eyes of all the sword maidens, Guhan's terminal reconnected to the network. The ripple-like pattern continued to spread outwards. This meant that the signal was being sent out from the terminal, and it was looking for a usable base station. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes passed, and the signal was still searching. There was no base station. How could this be? Isn't this the tower that blocked our communication? One of the sword maidens said disappointedly. No, it could be that there is another Lonely Tower somewhere else. We only destroyed one, so it's useless, another sword maiden guessed. Just as Guhan was beginning to lose hope of getting back in touch with Yuzhang City, the ripple suddenly began to vibrate. Then, a green dot appeared on the screen. This meant that the terminal had finally found a usable base station. Quick! Contact Yuzhang City. Quick! Seeing this, everyone was so excited that they almost cried. Finally, after so long, they could finally get back in touch with Yuzhang City. They could finally talk to their loved ones. Hello. Is this Yuzhang City? Hello, is this Yuzhang City's communication center? Please respond if you hear me. Please respond if you hear me. Guhan dialed the number of Yuzhang City's communication center, but there was no response. Mom. Mom. It's me, can you hear me? One of the sword maidens dialed his family's number, but there was also no response. Seeing this situation, the other sword bearers all dialed the number of their relatives, wanting to restore contact with them in Yuzhang City. However, without exception, all the calls were answered with a blank tone. Something strange happened. Although the terminal had connected to the base station, they did not seem to be able to get back in touch with Yuzhang City. But this did not make sense. The base station was installed in Yuzhang City. As long as the base station was connected, it would definitely be able to get back in touch with the entire city. How could they not be able to dial a single number? This was too illogical. Oh no. Could it be that Yuzhang City has already? One of the sword maidens suddenly thought of something and fell to the ground in horror. If the base station in Yuzhang City could not work, then it was very likely that the entire city had fallen. Just like Yeyang Fortress, Yuzhong City had been breached by the surging Yuan coup, and the entire city had been destroyed. Shut up. We haven't figured out the situation yet, so stop spouting nonsense. Seeing that everyone's morale had been disturbed by the Sword Maiden's words, Guiyi hurriedly scolded the Sword Maidens. Then what should we do now? Everyone looked at Guhan and Guiyi. In this situation, only the two main pillars of the team could make the decision. Sigh. I'll try again. Guiyi projected his personal terminal and quickly dialed a number. There was no response. Guiyi dialed another number. There was still no response. When Guiyi dialed the third number without any hope, unexpectedly, a beeping sound came from the other end of the communication device. Everyone heard this sound for a moment. Finally, it was no longer a dead tone. Finally, they could hear the beeping sound. This meant that the call had been made. Now, it was up to the owner of the personal terminal on the other end of the communication device to pick up the call. Mother **K, who dares to call me at this time? If there's nothing urgent, when I return to Yuzhong City, I'll lock you up in the disciplinary commission for discipline inspection. On the other end of the communication device was the hot-tempered voice of a man. The voice on the other end of the communication device was unclear because there were many other sounds mixed in. There were explosions, flames, wind, roars, and screams. It sounded like the other end was on a battlefield. Chapter 504. Guiyi became excited when he heard the noise in the background. Obviously, he recognized the owner of the voice. Master, it's me, Master. I didn't think I'd be able to speak to Master. This is great. Guiyi said excitedly. Wait. You are. The voice on the other end of the call suddenly stopped. All that could be heard were the sounds of battle in the background. After about 10 seconds, the voice spoke again. Just like Guiyi, his voice was also very excited. Guiyi, you're Guiyi. You brat, you're actually still alive. It's my master. Thanks to Master and Brother Jiyu Han's blessings, I, Guiyi, am able to come out of Fort Yuyang alive. I, Guiyi, am able to come out alive. Guiyi, this one. 8M tall man, was on the verge of tears as he spoke. Ha 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 ha. Good brat, I told you you wouldn't die. You won't die. The person on the other end of the call laughed wildly. This person was the pleated sword spirit, a spiritual sword rank swordsman who was in charge of defending Fort Yuyang. Not sure if everyone noticed, but the way Guiyi addressed the pleated sword spirit was a little special. He addressed the pleated sword spirit as master. This meant that Guiyi had already joined the pleated sword spirit's private force. That was why he addressed the pleated sword spirit as master and servant. This was a form of address that only existed in a private army. This meant that Guiyi had already joined the pleated sword spirit's private army and became a member. For a swordsman who aspired to become an emperor and become Gendi, a private army was something that had to be formed. This was because the synchronization between emperor swords and sword ladies was not as simple and clear as ancient swords, treasured swords, and famed swords. Sword wielders who were determined to become Gendi would have to go through a series of complicated processes and battles before they could ascend to the throne. Although every Gendi's ascension process was different, one thing was the same. The sword bearer who attempted to become emperor had to have his own private army to have a chance of success. In history, there were only 4 Gendis who succeeded in ascending the throne without forming a private army. However, their situations were special and couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. All in all, after the 5 Gendis, every Gendis had their own private army before ascending the throne, and their private army played an extremely important role in their ascension process. For Guhan, who aspired to become Gendi, it was only a matter of time before he formed his own private army. However, the Sword Committee had a strict rule that sword bearers who had not reached spirit sword level were not allowed to form their own private army. Even if they did, there was an absolute limit to the number of people who could form their own army. The Sword Committee would not allow a famed swordsman to form his own army. In a sense, private armies were a malignant tumor. This was because of Gendi's relationship with them that they had no choice but to exist. Humans couldn't cut off all private armies, so they could only make them as small as possible. Guiyi, you said that you escaped from Fort Yuyang? Is that true? Because Gui Yi had always been in hands-free mode, everyone could hear the conversation between Gui Yi and the pleated sword spirit. I remember now. When the updraft communicated with us, you were also in the image. You were one of the survivors that was saved by the updraft, right? When the pleated sword spirit was speaking, there were a few violent explosions coming from time to time. Yes, Master. I was saved by the updraft. I just escaped from Fort Yuyang today, Gui Yi replied. That's great. That's great. Good boy. If it wasn't for Master Wu Dao stopping me, I would have returned to Fort Yuyang to save you. By the way, how are the survivors with you? Did they all escape safely? Don't worry, Master. The other sword bearers have all escaped. We are very safe now and are preparing to return to Yuzhong City to rejoin Master's team. Hearing that Gui Yi was returning to Yuzhong City, the pleated sword spirit suddenly fell silent for a while, then asked, "How did you get in touch with me? All communications have been blocked, and I can't even receive communications from Yuzhong City. My lord, we just destroyed a lonely tower and removed the shield in this area. Only then did we restore communication. But my lord, it's fine if we can't contact Yuzhong City, but why can't you contact Yuzhong City either? Are you not in Yuzhong City now? It's a long story. I'll tell you when I see you." The pleated sword spirit sighed deeply. That's right. Since you were able to break out of Fort Yuyang's encirclement, the defenses of Fort Yuyang should be very weak right now, right? Otherwise, it would be impossible for a few dozen sword bearers to escape from Fort Yuyang. This. Gui Yi did not know how to answer. If he said that the defenses were weak, he would be lying. Although the defenses of Fort Yuyang had dropped a lot, it wasn't to the point where they couldn't stop Gui Yi's escape. If it wasn't for Ji Yu Han's incredible battle prowess, they might still be fighting bitterly in Fort Yuyang. But if the defenses were still strong, there was no way they could explain how they managed to escape. More importantly, the pleated sword spirit's words were filled with hope that the defenses of Fort Yuyang would be weak. This meant that Yuzhong City needed the defenses of Fort Yuyang to be weak. That's right. The defenses of Fort Yuyang are weak now, Gui Yi said through gritted teeth. Good. 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 The heavens have not forsaken Yuzhong City. The pleated sword spirit laughed, then quickly said, "Don't hang up. I'll transfer your call to Master Liu Lei right now. You have to tell Master Liu Lei everything about your situation, understand?" Sword Immortal Cloudy Sky. Gui Yi was shocked. He didn't think that he would have a chance to communicate with Sword Immortal Yun Xiao. This was the first time in Gui Yi's life that he was communicating with an immortal sword wielder. Even though he had interacted with a few universe-grade soul puppets, this was definitely the first time he was communicating with a human immortal sword wielder. After a few beeps, Guhan heard a very familiar voice. However, compared to before, this voice was filled with fatigue. It was as if Liu Lei had aged 10 years in an instant. "You're Gui Yi, right? I'm the chairman of Yuzhong City's Sword Committee, the head of the Sword Pavilion, Liu Lei. I only have one question for you. You must answer me honestly. Do not hide anything from me. Is the defenses of Fort Yuyang really weak?" Liu Lei's question was very calm, but it caused Gui Yi's entire body to break out in cold sweat. Hearing Liu Lei ask such a serious question, Gui Yi didn't know how to answer. He didn't know how to answer this question. Was Yuyang Fort's defenses really weak? Perhaps only Guhan could answer this question. "I'm weak." Gui Yi struggled for a long time before saying the word weak. However, when he put it together, it did sound a little strange. "Alright, if I order you to counterattack the Yuyang Fort and clear out all of the Yuan Ying in the Yuyang Fort in preparation for the arrival of the main army, can you do it?" Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that Liu Lei would actually make such a request. He actually wanted them to return to Fort Yuyang, and even wanted to wipe out all the remaining Yuan Kuan. To Gui Yi, this was a ridiculous request. They had spent so much effort to escape, could it be that they had to kill their way back now? We. Gui Yi, who was usually fluent in speech, began to stutter. He could not give Liu Lei an answer after a long time. "Let me ask you, can you take down Fort Yuyang?" Liu Lei used an even more oppressive aura to interrogate Gui Yi. When Gui Yi heard that, his body went limp and he almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Ji Yuhan appeared behind him in time and supported Gui Yi's waist, preventing him from falling to the ground. "Give it to me." Guhan patted Gui Yi's shoulder and tapped his own terminal against Gui Yi's. He said gently, "Give it to me, let me talk to my master." "Oh. Okay." Gui Yi didn't say anything. It was as if he had thrown away something he had seen a ghost. He tapped his personal terminal on Ji Yuhan's personal terminal and transferred the call to Ji Yuhan's personal terminal. "Who are you? What right do you have to talk to me?" Gui Yi's action of transferring his terminal could not be hidden from Liu Lei, because there was a system notification. "Master, it's me, Guhan." Guhan also turned on hands-free, allowing everyone to hear his conversation with Liu Lei. "Good disciple. Why are you there?" On the other side of the call, Liu Lei was shocked. He never thought that his disciple would appear here at this time. "Master, I'll answer that question when I have time. Right now, I just want to tell you one thing." Ji Yuhan paused for a moment, then said with incomparable determination, "Master, this disciple promises you that this disciple will definitely take down the Yuyang stronghold." Liu Lei was silent for a long time. "Good disciple, were you the one who saved Gui Yi and the others?" "It was me." Guhan smiled. "It was just a coincidence. It was mainly because of Gui Yi and the others. If you don't save yourself, the heavens won't save you." "Good. I believe in you," Liu Lei said happily. "I believe in you. Since you are the person chosen by His Majesty Shroud Heaven, you will definitely be able to help Yuzhong City overcome this crisis. You have 30 minutes to take back Fort Yuyang with your brothers. Then, hold the fort until our army arrives. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand." Ji Yuhan's words were like a mountain range, so firm that the people who heard it immediately put down the doubts in their hearts. "Master, if I may be so bold as to ask, what exactly happened? Why do you look so tired?" "I'm worried about your health," Guhan asked with concern. He could tell that Yuzhong City was in big trouble. "Nothing." Although Liu Lei said that it was nothing, he didn't say a word and hung up the communication directly. "Brother Ji Yuhan, what's going on?" After ending the call, Gui Yi asked Ji Yuhan in a very brainless manner. "It's nothing good. The whole of Yuzhong City is going to change." Guhan turned and walked in the direction of Fort Yuyang. "Let us complete our mission for Yuzhong City." Chapter 505. Even though he was returning to Fort Yuyang and reclaiming the humans' fort, it wasn't hard to imagine how difficult it would be with just 40 people. Let alone 40 people, any normal person would wish they had 400 people under their command. However, when he turned around, he didn't call for anyone to follow him. He just silently walked back by himself. He knew that some people didn't want to go back. He didn't want to say it out loud and be a bad person. In reality, after Guhan started walking, the rest of the sword bearers automatically followed behind Guhan without saying a word. As the saying goes, a warrior doesn't speak, only blood and sword. The Yuan Ku didn't expect Guhan and the others to return. There weren't even a few Yuan Ku at the gate. Guhan and his men easily re-entered Fort Yuyang. "Brother Gui Yi, please take 30 brothers and guard this place. Don't let a single Yuan Ku escape." After killing a few Yuan Ku near the gate, Guhan said to Gui Yi, "No, how can I do that? If I bring 30 people to guard this place, wouldn't that mean you only have 10 people?" Gui Yi waved his hand. "When I start the cleanup operation, there will be a large number of Yuan Ku trying to escape. If Brother Gui Yi doesn't have enough people, then we won't be able to guard the gate. If we kill all the Yuan Ku in Fort Yuyang, we might even be in danger. Therefore, 30 brothers is necessary. Brother Gui Yi, please don't say any more. But there are only 10 people, how can you possibly kill all the Yuan Ku in the fort?" Gui Yi continued to try to dissuade him. "Big brother Gui Yi, don't worry. Even a nether rank Yuan Ku can't do anything to me. Furthermore, there are no longer any nether rank Yuan Ku in Fort Yuyang. At most, there are only a few dragon rank Yuan Ku left. They're not even worthy opponents." With that, Guhan picked 10 people and once again charged into Fort Yuyang. Very quickly, they disappeared, leaving behind a dumbfounded Guiyi guarding the gate. F***CK. What the hell is this? Guiyi cursed and called out the names of 20 people, leaving only 10 to guard the city gates. He planned to send Guhan himself to help him. But before Gui-1 could make a move, he suddenly heard a crazed howl. Then, from the depths of Fort Yuyang, 4 or 5 desert wolves charged out. These desert wolves were all at the Soul Realm. Yuan Ku had to put in some effort to deal with them. So before Guiyi could make a move, he was pinned down by these desert wolves. Brothers, once we kill these desert wolves, we'll go help Brother Guhan, Guiyi yelled. He had no intention of giving up on helping Guhan. Unfortunately, he soon discovered that he was completely tied to this place. Wave after wave of Yuan Huans rushed out of Yuyang Fort. These Yuan Huans, who were usually arrogant and would viciously pounce on humans whenever they saw them, would tear them into pieces and swallow them into their stomachs. These Yuan Huans, who had scared the humans to the point that they looked like quails that had lost their heads out of fear, had now turned into quails, crazily rushing towards the city gate without any regard for their lives. The number of Yuan Kus gave Guiyi a big fright. F***CK. I finally know why Guhan gave me 30 people to guard this place. Even 60 people wouldn't be enough. This place is the most important battlefield. F***CK. I'm not doing this anymore. I'll let these Yuan Kus escape. Guiyi scolded angrily. Although he said that he was going to let these Yuanjin leave, in reality, he was commanding more than 30 sword maidens to form a human wall and block these soulless Yuanjin who were running for their lives at the city gate. Gradually, more than 200 magical beast Yuan silhouettes had accumulated at the city gate. They were all blocking the city gate, trying to rush into the world outside the city gate. 30 against 200. It sounded like these Yuan Kus were enough to kill Guiyi and the others many times over. But in reality, neither side was willing to give way to the other at the gates. Fort Yuyang was originally designed to be a defensive fortress, so the size of the gate was very small. At most, it was only big enough for a car to pass through. If the sword ladies stood side by side, it would take about 8 of them to block the entire gate. It was also because of the narrow position of the city gate that it looked like there were many Yuanjis blocking the city gate, but Guiyi's sword ladies actually had to face no more than 5 Yuanjis at the same time. With 8 sword ladies blocking, if a sword lady's personal shield ran out of energy, Guiyi would immediately command the other sword ladies to take over the position of that sword lady. With 30 sword ladies to take Guiyi's place, the battle was surprisingly easy. Some of the sword ladies even whistled happily at the end. It was a completely different feeling from before, as if they were facing a great enemy. Brother Guiyi, how's the situation on your side? Suddenly, Guiyi's communicator was connected, and Guhan's voice came from the other end. Ha ha ha. Brother Guhan, don't worry, I'm doing very well here. All the Yuan Kus have been blocked. You just need to focus on clearing out the remaining ones. As long as I have enough time, these 200 Yuan Kus will all be taken care of for you. Guiyi said proudly. Brother Guiyi is very brave, but unfortunately, we don't have much time left. Guhan said in a low voice. Not much time left. What do you mean? Guiyi was stunned. He just remembered that Liu Lei had given them 30 minutes to clear out all the Yuan Kus in Fort Yuyang. Looking at the time, they only had 5 minutes left. Brother Guiyi, you guys can rest for a while. Leave the rest to me. Leave it to you? What do you mean by that? Guiyi didn't get an answer to his question, so Guhan hung up. But soon, Guiyi knew that he didn't need to answer. This was because Guhan had already appeared behind Yuan Ku's back, holding the heavenly sword in his hand. Like a bolt of lightning, he charged into the group of Yuan Kus. Once upon a time, Guiyi had heard of a saying, wolves enter a flock of sheep. In Guiyi's heart, Yuan Kus were the wolves, and humans were the lamentable flock of sheep. Even now, Guiyi hadn't changed his opinion. But he saw another saying, sheep enter a flock of wolves. The thin Guhan looked like a weak little sheep, but he charged straight into the pack of Yuan Kus that was like a pack of wolves and tigers. When these Yuan-Kus saw Guhan's appearance, the entire pack became restless. They began to attack Gu Yi's defensive line even more frantically. Guhan alone suppressed more than 200 Yuan-Kus. When these Yuan-Kus saw Guhan, they didn't even have the courage to continue fighting. All they wanted to do was run. This was because Guhan's side was too terrifying. Every time Guhan swung his sword, several Yuan-Kus would fall to the ground and be absorbed by different dimensional vortexes. This group of Yuan-Kus decreased at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the last 5 Yuan-Kus screamed and fell in front of Gu Yi's group, they didn't know how to look at Guhan anymore. When Guhan first met them, they only felt that Guhan was lucky to be able to synchronize with Lady Yi. Apart from that, he didn't have any strong points. Later, when Guhan led them out of Fort Yuyang, they felt that Guhan was a sharp arrow that could tear through the defenses of powerful enemies. His strength was indeed above theirs, but Guhan's strength didn't exceed their common sense. Then, Guhan destroyed the nether-rank Yuan-Ku's heroic spirit archer. Even though there was the so-called sword energy crystal, it couldn't hide the fact that Guhan could monopolize over 100 Yuan-Kus, not to mention that almost every Yuan-Ku's level was higher than Guhan's treasured sword wielders. At this time, they already felt that Guhan's strength had exceeded the common sense of normal people. And now, Guhan was no longer a normal person. He couldn't be explained as a normal treasured sword wielder. Even if the pleated sword spirit was here, Gu Yi didn't think that he could do what Guhan did. In less than 5 minutes, a treasure sword tier sword wielder had slaughtered 200 Yuanshan from rat tier to dragon tier. If Gu Yi hadn't witnessed it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. Ah! When the last Yuan-Ku was killed, Guhan suddenly gasped. His legs went limp, and he fell forward onto a sword maiden in front of him. This sword maiden was a man-made sword maiden. She didn't have her own consciousness. Without her master's command, even though Guhan's face was stuck between her breasts, she didn't say a word and let Guhan stick there. "Brother Guhan, what's wrong? Did you overuse your sword essence? Are you okay?" Gu Yi hurriedly rushed up to support Guhan's shoulders and pushed him up. Gu Yi saw an expression that he would remember for the rest of his life. At this time, Guhan's face was completely red. His eyes seemed to be burning with desire. That's right, it was desire. It was the desire of a man to find a place to burrow. Seeing Guhan's gaze, Gu Yi subconsciously tightened his legs. He was afraid that Guhan's desire would suddenly burn him. "You guys guard the gate, I'm going to rest for a bit." Feeling Gu Yi's muscles, Guhan seemed to be a little more awake. After saying this to Gu Yi, he ran back into the fortress, found a random house, and entered it. He didn't come out again. That was close. Gu Yi silently rubbed his butt. If Guhan really made a request, he really didn't know whether he should reject it or not. Chapter 506. Guhan could no longer control the fire of lust in his body, or in other words, the fire of lust had already exceeded the level that Guhan could control. Getting rid of all the Yuanshan in Fort Yuyang in half an hour, and getting rid of the Yuanshan blocking the entrance in 5 minutes. This was even more amazing than Ji Yu Han getting rid of a dark-level Yuanshan. Even with the support of the yin-yang sword secret, Guhan could not do this. Therefore, Guhan had no choice but to use his forbidden skill, the 3 Green Lotus swords. The Green Lotus 3 swords sounded like 3 powerful sword moves, but that was not the case. Only the third move of the Green Lotus 3 swords was a real sword move. The first 2 moves were not sword moves at all. They were more like auxiliary secret skills. Guhan had only forcefully practiced the first sword of the 3 Green Lotus swords. Because he could not control the fire of lust in his body, Guhan gave up. However, the 3 Green Lotus swords was different from other sword skills. If you practiced other sword skills, you could improve, or if you practiced it, you could not improve, and even if you practiced it, you might even fall behind. In short, it was like a cold and beautiful girl, you had to pursue her to have a chance of getting her. However, the 3 Green Lotus swords was a crazy girl, and a serious one at that. Even if Guhan did not practice it, it would automatically circulate in Guhan's body, unless Guhan used his consciousness to forcibly stop the circulation of the sword essence in his body. Normally, Guhan would purposely separate a bit of his consciousness to control the 3 green lotus swords' circulation. However, there would always be times when Guhan could not divert his attention to control it, and at those times, the 3 green lotus swords would silently circulate. Until he entered the Yuyang fort, he had almost mastered the first sword of the 3 green lotus swords. However, Liu Lei's order had left Ji Yuhan with no other choice but to proactively practice the Green Lotus 3 swords. As a result, in just 1 minute, Ji Yuhan had mastered the first sword of the Green Lotus 3 swords. The first move of the Green Lotus 3 strikes was called Green Lotus White Root Body. It sounded like a very elegant name, but its effect was also very cool. It could increase Ji Yuhan's perception and body control by 100 times. What did that mean? Under the state of Green Lotus White Root Body, Guhan could sense everything within a few kilometers, from a yuan ku running past to 2 dung beetles mating. These things could not be hidden from Guhan. This was only for the outside, but for the inside, Guhan could even feel the activity of every cell in his body. And with his control increased by 100 times, his body could make nano-level movements. What was a nano-level movement? For example, Guhan could make the sword in his hand move by a nanometer, and he could even make a single strand of his hair bend freely. Although there was no increase in absolute power, under the condition of the Green Lotus White Root Body, the use of power had reached a level where not a drop of water leaked out, and not a single drop was wasted. Moreover, every single one of Guhan's sword attacks could hit Yuan Ku's weakest and most critical spots. Any Yuan Ku would have their own weak spots. Even if it was a Yuan Ku with a defense of 10,000, if his weak spot was hit by about 100 points of damage, he would die immediately without any room for resistance. At this time, Guhan's attack was like this. Even if it was a dragon-level Yuan Ku, Guhan could directly kill it with 1 sword attack. If Yuan Ku attacked together, Guhan could even directly pierce through these Yuan Ku's absolute weak spots with 1 sword attack. It seemed that Guhan only stabbed once, but in fact, in this sword attack, Guhan had already made dozens of micro-adjustments. Guhan seemed to have obtained a super buff with a 100% sure-kill effect in games. Below the dragon level, no Yuan Ku could be a match for Guhan's sword attack. Below the dragon level, no Yuan Ku's weak spot could withstand a full blow from Guhan. It was a different story for those above the dragon level. Their realms were much higher than Ji Yuhan's. Therefore, when Guhan slaughtered Yuan Ku with 1 sword attack, or even a few at a time, these ferocious Yuan Ku were scared out of their wits. They frantically fled towards the fortress gate, which led to the scene of Guiyi blocking the gate. These Yuan Ku were all scared out of their wits by Guhan. The Green Lotus White Root was strong, but the side effect was too strong. Although it had such a poetic name, the side effect was irresistible burning of desire. When Guhan used the last of his willpower to lock himself in the house, he completely lost control of his body. What happened after that? Boss Guhan, we've checked. There are no longer any Yuan Ku in the fortress. All the Yuan Ku have been chased out. A few minutes after Guhan entered the house, the 10 sword bearers who were taken away by Guhan came running back. Unfortunately, they didn't see Guhan, only Guiyi, who had a strange look on his face. Boss Guhan is tired. He's going to rest. Don't disturb him, Guiyi said with concern. Oh right, what were you guys doing just now? It's not that I have a bad mouth, but with Guhan's combat strength, you guys might not even be able to keep up with his speed. We really can't keep up with Lord Guhan's speed. The 10 sword bearers lowered their heads in shame. Every time Lord Guhan clears a place, he orders us to guard it. If any Yuan Ku barges in, we are to chase these Yuan Ku to the fortress gate. So that's how it is. Guiyi finally understood. Guhan was afraid that when he was clearing out Yuan Ku wouldn't escape through the gate, but to another area. This was why he ordered the 10 sword bearers to guard 10 different areas, to ensure that all the Yuan Ku in the Fort Yuyang is cleared. Then are you sure that there are no longer any Yuan Ku in the Fort Yuyang? Guiyi asked. When we came back, we confirmed that there are no longer any Yuan Ku in any of the areas. We swear on our lives. the 10 sword-bearers said with determination. That's good. Gu Yi took in a deep breath, before raising his right hand and exclaiming, fellow brothers, I officially announce that the Yuyang fort has been reclaimed. Long live! One of the sword-bearers yelled. Long live! The other sword-bearers followed suit. Long live boss Jiyu Han. Suddenly, these words came out of Uncle Huang's mouth. Long live boss Gu Han. The other sword-bearers protected Gui Wan and did not hesitate to shout out the same words as Uncle Huang. Unfortunately, Jiyu Han, who was in the room, could not hear this stirring voice. At this time, Gu Han was like a wild beast, smashing everything in the room. Since he couldn't find a way to vent his lust, he could only use the most primitive method to vent his lust. However, this was only treating the symptoms and not the root cause. Gu Han's body was getting redder and hotter. If there was a thermometer, Gu Han's body temperature had already risen to 70 degrees. Moreover, the temperature was still rising. What did this mean? Not to mention 70 degrees, even if your body temperature reached 40 degrees, you would fall into a coma. If it reached 42 degrees, you would die without timely rescue. If it reached 45 degrees, there was no need to call a doctor. You could just buy a coffin from a coffin shop. To borrow a headline from the news, how high is a person's body temperature? Gu Han's skin can fry an egg. This was thanks to Gu Han's body being strengthened by the sword maidens. He could still jump around and smash things at 70 degrees. However, if his body temperature continued to rise, Gu Han would definitely die. Even the medical chamber wouldn't be able to save him. In this situation, within Gu Han's purple mansion, the 3 sword maidens were having an emergency meeting. What should we do? If this goes on, Gu Han will definitely die. No. Big brother, you can't die. So be it. I've had enough fun these few days. It's not a big deal to go back and sleep for a few hundred years. No, Qingpin must save Gu Han. You can wait for a few hundred years, but Qingpin has to wait for a few thousand years. No. Big brother, Xiaoyun will definitely save you. What's with the noise? Isn't it easy to save him? One of you can forcefully turn into a woman, then take off your skirt and eat that thing with your mouth down there. Other than a little pain in the beginning, I guarantee that you'll feel great later on. My lord, we've succeeded. Fort Yuyang is back in our hands. Gui Yi excitedly reported the news to the pleated sword spirit. Gui Yi, this is Liu Lei. Yuzhang City will forever remember your great contributions to Yuzhang City. You are the great heroes of Yuzhang City. Unexpectedly, Liu Lei was on the other end of the line. Lord Liu Lei, this is what we should do. Everything for Yuzhang City. Everything for humanity. Gui Yi immediately replied solemnly. Millimeter, where's Gu Han? Where is he? Let him talk to me. Liu Lei and Gui Yi exchanged a few words and immediately started looking for Gu Han. Reporting, my lord. Brother Gu Han has exhausted himself in the battle just now. He's currently resting. If there's anything you must tell Brother Gu Han, I'll call Brother Gu Han right now. Gui Yi said. Forget it, he's tired. Let him rest for a while. Liu Lei's voice was a little pitiful. Gui Yi, we've just received news that an army of around 10,000 soldiers from Yuanku has already bypassed us and is heading straight for Fort Yuyang. Immediately restart the defense system of Fort Yuyang and defend the fort to your death. In another hour, our army will reach Fort Yuyang. Please hold on for an hour. Chapter 507. The defense system of Fort Yuyang was divided into 2 parts. The first part was the dimensional barrier around Fort Yuyang, and the second part was the city walls. The city walls of Fort Yuyang were made with a large amount of dimensional crystal powder. Yuan Ku couldn't penetrate these walls like normal walls, so he could only use his strength to destroy them. Normally, only nether rank or above Yuan Ku could cause substantial damage to these walls. Therefore, Yuan Kus could only escape through the city gates, as it was impossible for them to climb over the city walls. However, the city walls had its drawbacks. The city walls couldn't defend against aerial attacks, and even if you used dimensional crystal powder to build the city walls, it wouldn't be enough against a universe rank Yuan Ku. Sooner or later, A universe-rank Yuan Ku's attack would destroy the city walls. Therefore, the dimensional barrier became the first and most important defense system. The dimensional barrier was the greatest invention that the Holy Grandmasters had brought to humanity. The dimensional barrier could store human sword essence, and through a series of complicated processes, it could transform the sword essence into something similar to the energy of a shield, in other words, the dimensional barrier. Under normal circumstances, even an emperor's sword could only convert 1/4 of sword essences into 20 points of shield energy. However, with the dimensional barrier system developed by the Holy Grandmasters, 1/4 of sword essences could be converted into 50 to 1,000 points of shield energy. This was humanity's ultimate defense against Yuan Ku. Because of the dimensional barrier's high conversion rate, 100 sword-bearers could defend against 1,000 Yuan Ku's attacks for a day. It was also because of the dimensional barrier system that Yuan Ku's attacks couldn't be carried out. Out of 10 attacks, only one would be able to tear a hole in the dimensional barrier. Since ancient times, there had only been 5 attacks that could completely conquer a city. The production of the dimensional wall system was extremely complicated and required a large amount of manpower and material resources to produce. The only factory that could produce the dimensional wall system, Yangjing City's first protective wall manufacturing company, Limited, could only produce a small dimensional wall system in a year. If they wanted to produce a medium-sized dimensional wall system, it would take a full 10 years to produce. As for the legendary super wall protection system used by the base city, it would take about 50 years to build. However, the #1 wall protection company in Yangjing City had not produced a base city-level super wall protection system for 400 years. It was unknown whether they would be able to produce it again. Currently, Yangjing City's first wall manufacturing company mainly produced small dimensional barrier system. The price was so expensive that it required 1 billion RMB and 10 million hero coins to buy a small dimensional barrier system. Even with such a terrifying price, the first wall manufacturing company's products were in short supply. Many forces had stationed their people around Yangjing City's first wall manufacturing company for a long time. They would spend 365 days a year building a good relationship with the company's leadership in order to get their hands on the dimensional barrier system produced the following year. Yuyang Fortress used such a small-scale dimensional wall system. It was an antique created 300 years ago. The conversion rate between sword essence and shield energy was about 1/60, and the maximum amount of sword essence stored was only 1 million quarks, which was equivalent to 60 million shield energy at most. It was considered a very trashy small-scale dimensional wall system. However, even such a trashy system had taken the ancestors of Yuzhang City around 10 years to create it from the hands of the first wall manufacturing company. If it wasn't for the fact that the people of Yuzhang City had successfully competed with the Sword Emperor and ascended to the throne, the first wall manufacturing company probably wouldn't have agreed to sell it to Yuzhang City. The correct way to use the dimensional barrier system was for the sword-bearers to stand on the wall and use the sword essence collection system installed on the wall to transfer the sword essence in their bodies to the dimensional barrier system. Then, their sword ladies would fight outside the dimensional barrier system. Once the sword lady's shield was broken, they would immediately retreat into the dimensional barrier system and wait for the shield to recover. This was the correct way to use the dimensional barrier system. However, they never would have thought that 4 universe-level Yuan Li would lead tens of thousands of Yuan Li to launch a surprise attack on the Yuyang fort. The sword-bearers didn't even have the time to stand on the wall and inject their sword essence into the wall before the 60 million energy shield was broken. The Yuyang fort lost the protection of the wall and the sword-bearers could only rely on the wall to defend. In the end, the wall quickly collapsed and the Yuyang fort fell just like that. The dimensional barrier system, which was the most important part of Yuyang City's defense, didn't even have the chance to display its advantages before it was destroyed. Gui Yi felt very unhappy when he thought of this. As a veteran who had been stationed at Yuyang Fortress for many years, Gui Yi was very clear about the internal situation of Yuyang Fortress. The dimensional barrier system of Yuyang Fortress was stored 50 meters underground, and it was protected by 50 meters of 50% dimensional crystal stone alloy. Unless a flood realm Yuan Ku came personally or spent half a year attacking continuously, they wouldn't be able to touch the dimensional barrier system. Loki didn't seem to be interested in destroying the dimensional barrier system. When Gui Yi and his men arrived at the core of the dimensional barrier system in the command center, the entire dimensional barrier system was still working perfectly. Even the collection system outside was not damaged. Awesome. Now I can directly use the dimensional barrier system, Gui Yi shouted excitedly in his heart. If the external collection system was destroyed, then Gui Yi would have to open the protective layer of the dimensional barrier and input sword essence from the internal sword essence collection system. This would undoubtedly waste a lot of time, and whether or not he could complete the reactivation of the dimensional barrier before Yuan Yang's troops arrived was still a big question mark. System, begin reactivation. Gui Yi placed his hand on a control panel and gave his command. Soon, an electronic voice could be heard. Scanning your fingerprint, please wait. Scan complete. The order was issued by the famed sword-level sword wielder, Gui Yi. Your fingerprint has been confirmed. Scanning your iris. Please open your eyes and don't blink too often. Scan complete. Your identity has been confirmed for the second time. Welcome, Gui Yi. You have level 3 authority and can restart the dimensional barrier system. The dimensional barrier system is reactivating. Warning. Warning. Insufficient sword essence in the system. Insufficient sword essence in the system. Storage is less than 10,000 quarks. The system cannot be reactivated. Please transfer the sword essence into your body through the collection system immediately. Everyone, place your palms on the collection system. We must let our enemies know that Yuyang Fortress will not fall into our hands a second time. My body. Guhan slowly stood up from the ground. However, Guhan's clothes were no longer on his body. They were neatly stacked in a corner of the room. Guhan's body was completely naked. His little brother was also swaying back and forth, looking like it had run out of bullets. What's going on? Could it be that I've already? Guhan grabbed his little brother and rubbed it. There was no reaction at all. It didn't seem like he was burning with lust before. Guhan then looked at the zhun-qi of the 3 strikes of the green lotus in his body. It was very docile. There was no sense of restlessness. It was as weak as a little sheep. Guhan finally confirmed that the negative effects of using the first strike of the 3 strikes of the green lotus were over. At the very least, he wouldn't have to worry about the backlash of the 3 strikes of the green lotus for a long time. However, how did Guhan get rid of the lust in his body? A bad premonition emerged in Ji Yuhan's heart. Guhan wanted to stand up from the ground, but his legs suddenly felt weak. Several of the meridians in his legs gave off a faint pain. It was as if his whole body had been hollowed out. This situation made Guhan even more certain of his guess. Although he had guessed what had happened to his body, Guhan's expression didn't change much. He didn't blush, nor did he feel great. He just calmly faced it all. It was as natural as eating and drinking. Guhan first planned to change into a set of clothes from his dimensional pocket. He instinctively touched his chest. In the end, he touched his somewhat timid bullet head. Only then did Guhan realize that his clothes were gone. Compared to the neatly folded clothes, Guhan's dimensional pocket had been thrown everywhere. Fortunately, the things inside were not lost. Guhan took out a set of clean clothes and returned them. Then, he took out his 3 swords, Qingpin, Duyu, and Yi, and released them together. Like children who had done something wrong, Qingpin and Duyu lowered their heads when they came out. They didn't even dare to look at Guhan. Only Yi was drinking her beer. Since kvass was finished, Yi could only drink beer that wasn't strong enough. Yo. You're up. Come, let me tell you, a sip of beer after you're done is better than living as a deity. Yi Tian smiled and moved to Guhan's side. She handed the half-empty beer in her hand to Guhan. Guhan didn't refuse. He directly took the beer, poured it into his mouth, and drank it in one gulp. This was the 5th time in Guhan's life that he drank. However, Guhan felt that the number of times he drank might become more frequent in the future. Because alcohol was indeed a good thing. People who didn't drink it wouldn't know its benefit. Then, you 3 can tell me, who did that with me just now? Guhan originally wanted to say that they had sex, but when the words were in his mouth, he couldn't say it. In the end, it became that. It seemed that Guhan wasn't as calm as he appeared to be. Chapter 508. Hearing Guhan's question, Qingpin and Jiyu Yun looked at each other, then shook their heads vigorously. It's not Qingpin. It's definitely not Qingpin. The flesh on Qingpin's face bulged. It seemed that Qingpin had gained some weight recently. Qingpin is still a lowly. Oh, no. Qingpin is still a young girl. How could it be Qingpin? It's definitely not Qingpin. Qing Jian said with certainty. Was there a young girl who would call herself a young girl in such an open and above-board manner? It's not Xiao Yun either. Jiyu Yun immediately disassociated herself and hugged Qingpin, who was next to her. She had a scary look on her face as she said, Xiao Yun is Big Brother's little sister. Although Xiao Yun plans to push Big Brother down, it's better for Xiao Yun to grow up a bit. After that, Jiyu Yun pinched Qingpin's chubby face and added, at least a bit older than this cute guy. Hey, tell me clearly, who are you calling cute? Qingpin heard Jiyu Yun's words and immediately turned around to question Jiyu Yun. What's wrong with me saying you're cute, you stupid cute guy? I want to eat some of your mouth. Alright, the two cute guys started fighting as they talked, trying to bite off each other's mouth. This scene was really cute. More importantly, looking at Qingpin and Jiyu Yun's twisted bodies, Guhan felt that they shouldn't have done that to him. He heard that after doing that, walking would hurt so much that they would have to walk separately. Moreover, the two of them were so petite. If it was really the two of them, they probably wouldn't even dare to move, let alone fight. In that case, the only one who was suspicious was Yi Tian. In the end, Yi Tian rolled her eyes at Ji Yuhan and laughed, up to you. If you think that I took one of your HP, then I'll take it as I did. Hee, you didn't lose out either. This heroine also took your blood. Blood from 3 lifetimes, I won't let you down. Well, seeing Yi Tian's reaction, Guhan felt that Yi Tian was a bit impossible. Moreover, with Yi Tian's personality, she was definitely not the kind of sword maiden who was willing to trade her body for the safety of the sword wielder. Yi Tian was different from other sword maidens. Other sword maidens were afraid of falling into a deep sleep and hoped to be active in the world, but Yi Tian was the opposite. She should be a sword maiden who always wanted to sleep. From the looks of it, none of the 3 sword ladies seemed to be suspicious. Ji Yuhan did not plan to pursue the matter any further. Or perhaps he did not want to pursue the matter any further. If he really knew who the sword lady was, then Ji Yuhan would not know how to deal with his relationship with her. Ji Yuhan had never planned to become a sword companion with his sword lady. Forget it, the 3 of you listen to me. I, Guhan, have never been an irresponsible man. If you are willing, I will become sword companions with her and accompany her for the rest of my life. I will never let her down. Guhan finally said these words and left such a promise, then took the initiative to end the interrogation about his first night partner. TCH, who wants to marry you? Yi Tian rolled her eyes and no longer paid attention to Guhan. Qingpin and Jiyu Yun looked at each other for a while, their eyes revealing some unfathomable emotions. Just like that, this matter that was of utmost importance to Ji Yuhan's life had temporarily come to an end. For a period of time, Ji Yuhan had been thinking about this problem for many sleepless nights. In his opinion, these 3 sword maidens didn't seem to be possible. He vaguely felt that there might be a 4th person among them, but as for who this 4th person was, Guhan really didn't have a clue. Later on, Guhan also looked for the survivors of the Yu Yang fort's counterattack and asked if they had seen someone enter his house. In the end, these sword bearers gave Guhan a very definite negative answer. Because Guhan's house was near the city gate, almost everyone on the city wall could clearly see every movement in Guhan's house. Whether someone had entered Guhan's house or not couldn't be hidden from their eyes. However, there was a sword bearer who gave Guhan such an interesting Qingpin. When he passed by Guhan's house, he heard the sound of running water. Why would a room without a drop of water be able to hear the sound of running water? It wasn't until everything was clear that Guhan knew the truth. Then, he could only helplessly accept this unexpected fact. Brother Gui Yi, Yuan Ku is here, Yuan Ku is here. A ray of light flew back to the sword-bearer standing on the city wall. The sword-bearer ran in front of Gui Yi and shouted. His sword maiden was a sword maiden of the path of slaughter. She was hiding on a high ground 3 kilometers away and was responsible for scouting the situation from afar. Since his sword maiden had returned, it meant that Yuan Ku's vanguard army had already appeared in his sword maiden's field of vision. What's the situation with Yuan Ku's army? Gui Yi hurriedly asked. Brother, I can't tell the exact number, but there are definitely more than 5,000 Yuan Kus. There are also a few hundred blazing phoenixes in the sky, and they even have aerial troops. The sword-bearer in charge of scouting reported. What about their levels? Did you get a good look at the levels of these Yuan Kus? I got a good look at some of them. Most of these Yuan Kus are Tiger and Ghost Yuan Kus, but there are quite a few Soul and Flood Dragon Yuan Kus mixed in. There are also a few Dragon Yuan Kus. As for Nether Yuan Kus, I didn't see a single one. That's good. We can still hold our ground. Gui Yi let out a sigh of relief. This was exactly the strength of Yuan Kus that he had expected to hold Fort Yuyang. With their full power, the Fort Yuyang's barrier had accumulated more than 100,000 quarks worth of sword essence. With more than 6 million quarks worth of energy, it should be able to hold off these Yuan Ku's attacks for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, the main force from Yuzhang City would arrive, and they would be completely safe. With this thought in mind, Gui Yi welcomed the dense group of Yuan Ku's vanguard. Just as the swordsman had reported, these Yuan Kus were mainly Tiger and Ghost Yuan Kus. All of you sword maidens, come into the dimensional barrier. Listen to my command and focus fire at any time. With Gui Yi's command, more than 40 sword maidens appeared in the middle of the dimensional barrier. With the dimensional barrier's protection, even if the sword maidens were only a meter away from the Yuan Ku, these Yuan Kus would not be able to hurt them. These huge numbers of Yuan Kus did not stop. They began to rush like a raging flood, crashing into the dimensional barrier of Fort Yuyang. The dimensional barrier did not have any color. Humans and sword maidens could not even sense its existence. However, in Yuan Ku's perception, the dimensional barrier was like a solid invisible wall that could not be crossed. Awoo! Swoosh swoosh! Cluck! 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 The roars of various magical beasts gathered together. They raised their claws and began to madly attack the dimensional barrier. Some of the Yuan Kus that knew magic began to prepare their own innate magic to attack the dimensional barrier. On top of the city wall, Gui Yi nervously looked at the display in front of him. This was the display that displayed the remaining energy of the dimensional barrier. The original number of 689,0400 began to rapidly decrease. In less than a minute, this number had dropped from 6.9 million energy to 6.5 million. In an instant, 400,000 energy had disappeared. If this kind of attack were to land on Gui Yi's team, it would be enough to wipe them a few hundred times over. 400,000 per minute, 4 million in 10 minutes, 8 million in 20 minutes. I have 7 million. If I add the sword essence that I can replenish in 20 minutes, I can definitely make it through. Gui Yi quickly calculated. Previously, the 100,000 quarks of sword essences were the result of all the sword wielders emptying their bodies of sword essences and injecting them into the dimensional barrier system. Now, all the sword wielders' bodies were empty of sword essences. If they were not in combat, the sword maidens could recover about half of their sword essence in 20 minutes. However, their sword maidens were on standby, ready to charge into battle at any time. Once they were in combat, the sword maiden's sword essence recovery would immediately stop. All sword maidens, don't move. Wait for our orders. Everyone, focus on recovering your sword essence. Gui Yi loudly ordered. Just like that, a few minutes passed. Just like normalization's calculation, the shield lost about 450,000 energy per minute. In addition to the sword essence that the sword wielder would need to recover, it seemed like the shield could last for another 20 minutes. Of course, things did not go as smoothly as they thought. Suddenly, a few dozen 3-story-tall ogres with 2 heads and huge clubs appeared in front of Yuan Ku. They slammed their clubs heavily against the dimensional barrier. With just a single attack, The dimensional barrier's energy was reduced by 10,000 at a visible rate. These are the ogre chieftains, the dragon-class Yuan Ku. Damn it, why did they appear at this time? Gui Yi was anxious. The ogre chieftain wasn't scary in daily battles. Although they had two heads, they weren't of the same mind. In addition, their bodies weren't nimble enough, and they didn't have any long-range attacks. The only thing they could do was to use their clubs to attack. Although the clubs in their hands did indeed have great offensive power, surpassing even the limits of a dragon-level elemental soul and faintly having the offensive power of a nether-level elemental soul, even a novice-famed sword-wielder's sword lady could easily grind these ogre chieftains to death. They were simply too clumsy. Normally, Gui Yi would feel like he had meat delivered to his doorstep when he encountered the ogre chieftains. However, now that the ogre chieftains had appeared at the edge of the dimensional barrier, it was terrible. The ogre chieftains' sword maidens could deplete the ogre chieftains' energy by more than 100,000 per minute. If they allowed the ogre chieftains to continue attacking, they would not be able to last 20 minutes. Chapter 509. We have to kill those ogre chieftains, or else we won't be able to hold on. Gui one thought popped into his mind, and he immediately began to give orders. Everyone, gather your sword maidens together, then charge out of the dimensional barrier and kill those ogre chieftains. Do you understand? Gui one had no choice but to use the sword maidens to fight. However, once the sword maidens were used, it meant that the sword maidens could not recover their sword essence within a short period of time. The 40 sword maidens received their orders, and they charged out in front of one of the ogre chieftains. All of their skills were used on the unfortunate ogre chieftain. The ogre chieftain screamed. Even though he was a dragon Yuan Ku, he could not survive after being hit by 40 sword maidens' skills. He returned to the dimensional vortex. After killing the ogre chieftain, the sword maidens quickly retreated into the dimensional barrier to prevent the other Yuan Ku from destroying their shields. They still had 12 ogre chieftains to deal with. Very quickly, the sword maidens chose their next target. Unfortunately, most of their skills were on cooldown, so they could only use their swords to fight the ogre chieftain. Naturally, normal attacks dealt much less damage than skill attacks. Even after 3 or 4 rounds of attacks, the ogre chieftain still failed to kill it. Meanwhile, the other primordial souls surrounding the ogre chieftain were no pushovers, either. 2 or 3 diabolo monsters simultaneously attacked an ancient sword rank sword mistress next to them. Diabolo monsters were typical Yuan Ku with high attack and low defense. Their attack power exceeded the standard of a tiger-class Yuan Ku, reaching the standard of a ghost-class Yuan Ku. After a few rounds of attacks, the ancient sword maiden's shields were broken. The sword maiden's sword wielders seemed to wake up from a dream. They hurriedly ordered their sword maidens to retreat back into the dimensional barrier. Although the sword maiden did not suffer much damage in terms of durability, her shields had been broken. It would take about 10 minutes for them to recover. In other words, they could not send their sword maidens out to fight for the next 10 minutes. The same thing happened to the other sword maidens, but their sword maidens were vigilant enough to retreat before their shields were broken. By the time the second ogre chieftain was killed, 3 ancient sword maidens had already lost their ability to fight. They needed to recover the energy of their personal shields before they could continue fighting. And the sword elemental energy in their bodies could no longer be supplied to the dimensional barrier, so they had to be used to repair the sword maidens' personal shields. Fortunately, they had only lost 3 ancient sword maidens. By the time they killed the 7th ogre chieftain, 20 of the sword maidens had already lost their shields. Without their shields, going out to kill the ogre chieftain would be suicidal. But similarly, if they ordered the remaining 20 sword maidens to attack, they would also be suicidal. The attacks of 20 sword maidens could not guarantee that they could kill the ogre chieftain in a short period of time. If they could not kill it in a short period of time, they would be killed by the massive Yuan Ku. For a moment, Gui Yi was at a loss. He had no idea how he should continue to defend this place. At the end of the day, there were too few sword-bearers. Under normal circumstances, Fort Yuyang, which had a few hundred sword-bearers, would have been incredibly easy to defend. He would not be as confused as he was right now, not knowing what to do. However, Gu Yi soon stopped worrying about the ogre chieftain, because something even more troublesome had happened. In the distance, a few large beasts had appeared in the Yuan Ku horde. They were as tall as a 3-story building, and they looked like giant rhinoceroses. A few beast men sat on their backs, and they had placed 2 large drums in front of them. These beast men were using bone mallets in their hands to beat the drums madly. When the Yuan Ku heard the drumming, their eyes turned bloodshot, and their attacks on the dimensional barrier became even more powerful. These were Kodo behemoths, a rare support type of Western diamonds. Their own combat strength was not high, but they had an amazing ability. The roar that came from their backs could increase the attack power of the Yuan Ku by about 20%. In a large-scale battle, this kind of power was practically a godlike ability. The most obvious change was that the energy of the dimensional barrier was decreasing at a rate that left Gu Yi in despair. Heavens! The energy is dropping by more than 700,000 per minute. Gu Yi stared in horror at the change in the dimensional barrier's energy value. The appearance of these large demonic beasts had actually caused the entire demonic beast horde's attack power to rise. The dimensional barrier's energy had already fallen to less than 2 million, and it had only been less than 8 minutes since the demonic beasts had started attacking. With 2 million left, they wanted to hold on for 12 minutes. No matter how he thought about it, it was impossible. Looks like I have to prepare for the gate battle. Gu Yi thought to himself. The dimensional barrier's destruction was inevitable. He had already begun to plan for the next gate battle. Just like how they defended against the wave of Yuan Ku that Guhan had chased away, as long as they could defend the gate and prevent the Yuan Ku from attacking, then he still had a chance. But, what about those things in the sky? Gu Yi raised his head, and looked at the hundreds of blazing phoenixes that were spewing fire at the dimensional barrier. They were all flying units, so once the dimensional barrier was destroyed, they would be able to directly appear inside Fort Yuyang. Once they attacked from both sides, Gu Yi could almost imagine himself being burnt to a crisp. It would be great if Jiyu Han was here. With him here, we might be able to kill those damned Kodo beast. Gu Yi instinctively thought of Guhan. When Guhan fought against the underworld Yuan Ku, and the Yuan Ku of Fort Yuyang, that terrifying battle prowess had been carved into Gu Yi's heart. In his heart, Guhan was already someone who could not be defeated. But Guhan is currently resting. If I call him over now, will he? Forget it, I can't care so much. Holding on to Fort Yuyang is the most important thing. Gu Yi was just about to send someone to call Guhan over, but when he turned around, Guhan had already appeared behind him. Brother Guhan, that's great. That's great. Seeing Guhan appear, Gu Yi was so excited that he couldn't even speak properly. All he could say was, that's great, that's great. This made Gu Yi extremely happy. What's so great about that? Guhan smiled bitterly. What's the situation now? Can we hold on? It's terrible. Gu Yi smiled bitterly at Guhan as well. The dimensional barrier has been reactivated, but there's only 1,800,000 energy left. It can probably only hold on for another 3 minutes. But we're still 8 minutes short of the time we promised Sword Immortal Cloud Sky. I'm already preparing for the gate battle. Only 1,800,000 energy left. Guhan looked down at the monitor, then placed his palm on the sword essence harvester. A few seconds later, the number on the monitor jumped from 1,800,000 energy to 2,400,000 energy. Just now, Jiyu Han had directly injected 10,000 quarks of sword essence into the dimensional barrier. Brother Guhan, you're already a famed sword-tier swordsman? Gu Yi was shocked when he saw this. It's just that I have enough sword essence. Don't forget, I just killed a nether Yuan Ku and obtained quite a lot of sword essence from its dimensional vortex. It's just enough for me to break through the limit between a treasure sword and a famed sword-tier swordsman, Guhan said calmly. In fact, the nether Yuan Ku had not given Guhan a lot of sword essence. It was only about 1,000 quarks. Gu Yi forced a smile when he saw the additional 600,000 energy points. Unfortunately, this can only help us hold on for another minute at most. The real problem is those Kodos. Guhan looked at the Kodos in the Yuan Ku group that were drumming crazily. If we kill them, I think the 2,400,000 energy points should be able to hold on for another minute or two. That makes sense, but these kodos are protected by the Yuan Ku army in the middle. Our sword maidens will probably be devoured by those Yuan Ku before they can even reach them. From Gui Yi's tone, one could tell that in his eyes, this was yet another impossible mission. Leave it to me. I happen to have a bellyful of anger that I can't vent. Guhan laughed. Are you kidding me? You just transferred 10,000 quarks of sword essence. Before Gui Yi could finish, Guhan leaped down from the city wall and jumped into the endless Yuan Ku army. Be careful, brother Guhan. What else could Gui Yi do? He could only pray weakly on the city wall. Seeing that there were humans jumping down to their deaths, the Yuan silhouettes near Ji Yuhan's landing point all jumped with joy. They wanted to eat this delicious meal, but what they got was a cold long sword. Wherever Ji Yuhan's sword went, the heads of all the Yuan silhouettes were chopped off. These were only some tiger-class Yuan silhouettes that were equivalent to ancient sword wielders, so they were not enough for Ji Yuhan to kill. However, if one took a closer look at the Yuan Ku's wounds, one would find a surprising discovery. The wounds were covered in a thin layer of frost, as if they had just been taken out of a freezer. The surrounding Yuan Ku continued to charge at Guhan, but none of them were a match for Guhan. Guhan walked among the Yuan Ku like he was taking a leisurely stroll. Before he knew it, he had already reached the side of the Kodo beast. This kind of dragon Yuan Ku would only take a bit of effort and time for Guhan. But when Guhan raised his heavenly sword to finish off the unlucky Kodo beast, the entire Yuan Ku group suddenly stopped moving. After a second of daze, all the Yuan Ku began to flee in all directions. The Yuan Ku that had not been able to touch the Yaoyang stronghold before suddenly ran away as if they had encountered something terrifying. Guhan only had time to kill a few Yuan Ku before the rest of the Yuan Ku fled. Could it be? Guhan raised his head and saw a weary old man hovering above him. Behind him was a human army that was slowly marching towards the Yaoyang stronghold. Chapter 5:10. Hey, it doesn't look like they've won a great victory. The two swordsmen standing on the city gate whispered to each other. At first, they thought that Yuzhong City's army had arrived at Fort Yuyang because the humans had won a great victory in Yuzhong City and were preparing to liberate Fort Yuyang. If that was really the case, then the human army should have been excited and in high spirits. But now, the army in front of them was crestfallen and disheveled, as if they had lost a battle. Oh my God, I have a bad feeling. What happened to Yuzhong City? Guhan, Gui Yi, you did well. If you hadn't taken over Fort Yuyang first, I'm afraid we wouldn't even have a place to stay. Liu Lei sat on a chair in the command center. His whole body was limp, as if he had just run for tens of thousands of meters. Master, you must be joking. Even without us, as long as Yuzhong City's army arrived, Fort Yuyang would have been taken in an instant. Guhan didn't dare take credit. No, if the 10,000 Yuan Ku soldiers had all entered Fort Yuyang, it would have taken at least half an hour for us to break into Fort Yuyang. By then, when the Yuan Ku army behind us pressed forward, we would have become stuffed buns. I'm afraid the remaining 3,000 of our people would have all died outside Fort Yuyang. Liu Lei patted Ji Yuhan's shoulder as he spoke. Good disciple, without you, our Yuzhong City might really have perished. City of Death is exterminated. When Ji Yuhan and Gui Yi heard these three words, their bodies started to tremble. The destruction of a dead city? What did that mean? Was Yuzhong City already destroyed? Master, what happened? Guhan raised his head and stared into Liu Lei's eyes. Master, what happened to Yuzhong City? How is it? Liu Lei tightly grasped the armrest of his chair. The veins on the back of his hands were all bulging, as if his body had accumulated a huge amount of anger. Liu Lei was like a balloon that was filled with air, but in the next second, this balloon burst. Liu Lei's anger seemed to have dissipated in an instant, and he became a useless old man again. Maybe he's still struggling at death's door. Maybe he's already gone. I can't do anything. Liu Lei's face became even older. Lost. Everything is lost. I lost, old man Wu Dao also lost. I'm still alive, old man Wu Dao left. What did Liu Lei mean? Old man doubtless left. What did that mean? Could it be that white stallion sword immortal Zhu Wudao was already dead? Only then did Guhan realize that he had not seen sword immortal Baiju Wudao's figure throughout the entire process. At first, Guhan thought that Zhu Wudao was in charge of guarding Yuzhang City and did not follow the army. Only now did he remember that if there was really a celestial sword-tier sword wielder guarding Yuzhang City, then according to the rules, the person guarding Yuzhang City should be Liu Lei, the sword pavilion master, and not the sword committee chairman, Zhu Wudao. Suddenly, Guhan remembered another detail. When Gui Yi and Liu Lei had first communicated, Liu Lei had said this: "I am the chairman of Yuzhang City's sword committee, Cloudy Sword Immortal Liu Lei." At first, Guhan thought that Liu Lei had made a slip of the tongue and missed the word vice-chairman. Now, Guhan understood that Liu Lei had really become the chairman of Yuzhang City's sword committee, because the original chairman, Zhu Wudao, was dead. Impossible. Master Sword Immortal Baiju, he. Gui Yi's reaction was not slow. He quickly analyzed the terrifying truth in Liu Lei's words. However, Gui Yi could not accept this explosive news at all. He took a few steps back dumbly and sat on the ground. "Don't ask Master Cloudy Sky, I will answer your questions. Let Master Cloudy Sky rest for a while, he has almost used up all the sword essence in his body." The pleated sword spirit walked in from the door. He had gone to arrange the arrangements for the army in Fort Yuyang, so he was a little late and came to answer Aiting. Following that, as the pleated sword spirit narrated, the whole picture of the incident was slowly outlined. This morning, Yuzhang City had organized half of the swordsmen to launch the biggest counterattack since Yuan Ku's invasion. More than 5,000 swordsmen, under the unified leadership of 12 spirit sword-level swordsmen and 2 immortal sword-level swordsmen, launched a surprise attack on Yuan Ku's army in Maiden mountain range. Humans were the race that liked to prepare for a rainy day. Perhaps Zhu Wudao had already predicted that Yuzhang City would need to take the initiative to attack outside the city sooner or later, so after the quantum teleportation array was developed, a temporary base was built somewhere underground outside the city. There was nothing else in the base except for a huge quantum teleportation array. 5,000 swordsmen used the teleportation array to silently leave Yuzhang City and directly teleport to the foot of Maiden mountain range, launching a surprise attack on Maiden mountain range. At the beginning, everything went very smoothly. Under the leadership of their respective leaders, the 3 armies successfully killed all 6 giant platinum earthworms. Then, according to the plan, the 3 armies attacked Loki's temporary palace and snatched the creator's divinity from Loki's hand. However, the humans did not know that all of this was Loki's plot. When the 3 armies gathered, Loki walked out of his palace. Moreover, Loki seemed to be in a rather sorry state. There were many wounds on his body, and more than half of his gorgeous armor was damaged. It seemed like he had just experienced a great battle. Realizing that Loki was injured, the human camp was very happy. They felt that this was a heaven-sent opportunity. However, something that made the humans despair happened. Loki sneered and opened his palm. In his hand, there was not only the creator's divinity, but also a dazzling golden dimensional crystal that looked like the purest glass. Anyone who had an understanding of dimensional crystals knew that there was only one type of pure gold dimensional crystal, and that was the most powerful Emperor-type dimensional crystal. Rocky actually had an Emperor-type dimensional crystal in his hands long ago. Seeing this, the 2 immortal sword wielders, Liu Lei and Zhu Wudao, who were supervising the battle in the air, realized that they had fallen into a trap. Loki had deliberately lured the human troops out. Then, he planned to use the Emperor Zerg to activate the creator's divinity outside the city to destroy the main force of the human. No wonder it had been so easy along the way. There was almost no resistance from Yuan Ku. Most of the humans who died in the hands of the humans were magical beasts, Yuan Ku. It seemed like Loki had already mobilized the elites of Yuan Ku. After all, the attack of the creator's divinity would not discriminate between humans and Yuan Ku. If his elites were here, they would also be destroyed by the power of the creator's divinity. Seeing the Emperor Zerg and the creator's divinity appear together, Zhu Wudao and Liu Lei knew that something was wrong. They immediately pounced on Loki, planning to snatch the Emperor Zurg and the Creator's divinity. As long as they could snatch one of them, this crisis would be resolved. However, Loki did not give them any chance. When Liu Lei and Zhu Wudao took action, Loki had already put the Creator's divinity and the Emperor Zurg together. A powerful force that every human could feel began to gather in Loki's hands. In less than 10 seconds, the power of the Creator's divinity would be triggered by the Emperor Zurg, and the entire Mailing mountain range would be destroyed. According to records, once the power of the Creator's divinity was triggered, it could not be stopped. Even if the Emperor Zurg and the Creator's divinity were separated, this process could not be stopped because this was an irreversible change. At this moment, for Liu Lei and Zhu Wudao, the best choice was to quickly leave the Mailing mountain range through the Void Gate. If they were lucky, they could escape with all the Spirit Sword level swordbearers and preserve the top force of Yuzhang City. But in this case, Liu Lei and Zhu Wudao's lives would be saved, but the lives of more than 5,000 swordbearers would be lost. At this critical moment, they could either choose to sacrifice themselves or others. Zhu Wudao did not hesitate. He made the firmest and greatest choice in his life. He wanted to sacrifice himself to save these sword-wielders who had been brought to the gates of hell. Immortal sword-wielders could open the Void Gate to move, but the size of the Void Gate was extremely limited. Without causing any side effects, they could at most open a Void Gate that could accommodate about 20 people. However, if there were sword-wielders who risked their lives to not open the Void Gate, then they might be able to open a Void Gate that could accommodate more people. Zhu Wudao made such a choice. In just 3 seconds, he burned all his sword essence and life to open a large void door. However, this void door was not used to transfer the swordbearers. Even if Zhu Wudao burned all his life, he would not be able to open a void door that could hold 5,000 people. Zhu Wudao's Void Gate was prepared for Rocky. With his Void Gate, he rushed directly towards Rocky, who was moving slowly due to activating the power of the Creation Godhood. He hugged Rocky and rushed into his Void Gate, allowing the power of the Creation Godhood to explode in the world inside the Void Gate instead of acting on the Mailing mountain range. He had probably already expected that he would not be able to return from this trip. Before he rushed towards Rocky, Zhu Wudao handed over all his sword maidens, including the sword wielders who were immortal sword wielders, to Liu Lei. 5 seconds after Rocky and Liu Lei disappeared into the world of the Void Gate, Zhu Wudao's sword maidens instantly lost all their spirituality and returned to their original bodies that were like ordinary iron. This meant that these sword maidens had once again fallen into a deep sleep. There was only one reason for this, and that was that their master, sword immortal Zhu Wudao, was dead. These sword maidens had lost their sword wielders. On this day, Yuzhang City was in mourning. Chapter 511. This is a decision and a sacrifice that is destined to be great. You will become a great man in Yuzhang City's history, and I will just be a passerby in Yuzhang City. You are really smart, Zhu Wudao. You took away my chance to go down in history. I hate you so much. I wish I was the one who opened the Void Gate. This was what Liu Lei said at Zhu Wudao's memorial service in the future. It was also something that moved countless people to tears. Ji Yuhan believed that although it only took his master and Zhu Wudao 1 or 2 seconds to decide who would be the sacrifice, they had used countless ways to convince each other to be the sacrifice. Although the two old men always bickered and talked trash to each other, they must have been the best of friends in their lives. They had supported each other to get to where they were today, but now, they had to be separated forever. Ji Yuhan believed that his master and Zhu Wudao had only used 1 or 2 seconds to decide who would be the sacrifice. After Sword Immortal Baiju left, Yuzhang City only had Liu Lei as an immortal sword wielder. Coupled with the upcoming difficult sword era, Yuzhang City would probably enter its most bleak time. Of course, these were all in the future. The most important thing now was what was the situation in Yuzhang City. Why did a large group of people appear in Yeyang Fortress, which was 200 kilometers away from Yuzhang City? The pleated sword spirit continued to explain. Although Zhu Wudao used his life to open the Void Gate and brought Loki and the power of the creation divinity into the world of the Void Gate, But this couldn't control Loki for a long time. As the controller of the creation divinity, Loki shouldn't be attacked by the creation divinity. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the guts to activate the creation divinity himself. Loki was also a universe-level Yuan-Ku, and he also had the ability to travel through the Void Gate. Although Ju Wudao would definitely go as deep as possible after bringing Loki into the Void Gate so that Loki wouldn't be able to find the correct exit coordinates of the Merlin mountain range for a while, this could only buy him a little more time. Maybe it would only take 10 minutes for Loki to return to this world. Therefore, after Ju Wudao's death, Liu Lei forcibly controlled his emotions and began to command the 3 troops to retreat to the quantum teleportation array that they had used to come to Yuzhong City, attempting to return to Yuzhong City through the quantum teleportation array. Because Loki had withdrawn the elites of Yuan-Ku in advance, they did not encounter much hindrance when they returned to the vicinity of the quantum transmission array. But when they arrived at the transmission array, something terrifying happened. The quantum teleportation array had actually been activated. An endless stream of Yuan-Ku was being transported into Yuzhong City through the quantum teleportation array. This discovery almost caused Liu Lei to collapse on the spot. When the quantum teleportation array was developed by humans, they had considered the loophole of Yuan-Ku using the quantum teleportation array to launch a surprise attack on humans. Therefore, humans had made sufficient preparations for the quantum teleportation array. First, the quantum teleportation array was equipped with Yuan-Ku detection equipment. Once Yuan-Ku was detected, the core equipment of the quantum teleportation array would automatically lock down. Without a 126-digit password, it was absolutely impossible to restart the quantum teleportation array. Second, the quantum teleportation array was guarded by swordbearers all year round. Once they discovered that Yuan-Ku was approaching and they could not deal with it themselves, they would leave through the quantum teleportation array and lock it down at the same time. Third, the quantum teleportation array was equipped with a manually controlled self-destruct device. If the guarding swordbearers discovered that there were a large number of Yuan-Ku, then after careful consideration, they would directly activate the self-destruct device while retreating. Just like when the pleated sword spirit retreated from Yeyang Fortress, he had directly activated the self-destruct device. Fourth, there were also swordbearers at the other end of the quantum teleportation array who were responsible for the same task. Once the defensive measures on the other end were completely ineffective, they would immediately shut down the quantum teleportation array the moment they saw Yuan-Ku teleporting in, or directly destroy the quantum teleportation array. All in all, humans had set up almost perfect safeguards. In the 10 years since the quantum teleportation array had been in use, there had never been a case of Yuan-Ku teleporting to the other side through the quantum teleportation array. But now, the security of the quantum teleportation array had been breached. A large number of Yuan-Ku had actually teleported directly into Yuzhong City through the quantum teleportation array. This was a devastating discovery. Yuzhong City's dimensional barrier had completely lost its effect, and the ordinary humans in Yuzhong City would inevitably suffer extremely heavy losses. This was something that Yuzhong City had never imagined. One could imagine that Yuzhong City was now in an abyss of suffering. When Liu Lei saw this scene, he almost died of anger. He immediately ordered his troops to clear out Yuan-Ku at the entrance and reoccupy the quantum teleportation array. However, the location of the quantum teleportation array had gathered almost all of Yuan-Ku's troops. It was easier said than done to clear out Yuan-Ku near the quantum teleportation array. After fighting for about 10 minutes, not only did humans not get close to the quantum teleportation array, but they also suffered heavy casualties. After hundreds of sword-bearers died, Liu Lei could only make a prompt decision. He used his personal terminal to control the quantum teleportation array to self-destruct. After seeing the quantum teleportation array destroyed, Liu Lei's heart ached. He regretted not having made this decision earlier. Based on the speed of teleporting 100 people per minute, there would be 1,000 Yuan-Ku entering Yuzhong City through the teleportation array in 10 minutes. How many ordinary humans would these 1,000 Yuan-Ku kill? This was a painful thing to think about. Because of Liu Lei's decision, at least tens of thousands of people would not have to die, Destroying the quantum teleportation array made it impossible for Yuan Ku to enter Yuzhong City, but at the same time, the Swordbearers' troops couldn't quickly return to Yuzhong City through the teleportation array either. At this time, the Swordbearers' retreat route was almost surrounded by Yuan Ku. Therefore, Liu Lei made a prompt decision and ordered his troops to retreat, trying to return to Yuzhong City on foot. However, at this moment, the direction to Yuzhong City was the place with the most Yuan Dans, and Liu Lei could feel that there was a universe-level Yuan Dans that were staring at him from the shadows. The two of them had locked onto each other's auras, and if one of them made the first move, the other would definitely retaliate. Therefore, Liu Lei didn't dare to open a path for the human. Even if Liu Lei opened a path, he didn't have a large area of effect attack. Facing hundreds of thousands of Yuan Dans, Liu Lei wouldn't be able to open a path. Therefore, the troops could only retreat to the area where Yuan Ku was the weakest. Yuan Ku chased after them, tightly guarding the path to Yuzhong City, making it impossible for the human army to return to Yuzhong City. Gradually, the troops began to advance towards Fort Yuyang. Liu Lei knew that Yuan Ku was trying to work together with the Yuan Ku of Fort Yuyang to completely surround the humans and annihilate Liu Lei's troops. Liu Lei even noticed that 10,000 Yuan silhouettes, which were the fastest among the Yuan silhouettes, didn't care about Liu Lei at all as they charged towards the Yuyang fort. It was very obvious that they wanted to increase the strength of the Yuyang fort. They wanted to ensure that the Yuyang fort would have enough strength to protect their path of retreat. Just as Liu Lei was about to make a decisive decision to forcefully break through the encirclement from Yuzhong City, regardless of the number of casualties, the pleated sword spirit came looking for him. He actually told him that the group of sword-bearers who had been abandoned by Zhu Wudao had escaped from Fort Yuyang, and that Fort Yuyang was currently defenseless. This also explained why Guhan couldn't contact Yuzhong City, but could contact Liu Lei's troops. This was because the humans' quantum base station was located in the core area of Yuzhong City. Similarly, the large-scale quantum teleportation array was also located in the core area. Yuan Ku, who had entered the core area through the quantum teleportation array, must have destroyed the quantum base station inside, so Guhan couldn't contact Yuzhong City. When the distance between the personal terminals was less than 100 kilometers, the personal terminals could rely on their own signals to maintain contact, so there was no need for a base station. Therefore, Guhan and the others could contact the large army that was approaching Fort Yuyang. Then, the pleated sword spirit proposed a very risky plan. He believed that since Fort Yuyang's defenses were currently defenseless enough to allow 40 people to escape, then these 40 people might have a chance to reoccupy Fort Yuyang. As long as they could do this, then retreating to Fort Yuyang would not be a dead end for the majority of the army, but a path to survival. With the protection of Fort Yuyang's dimensional barrier, they would be able to resist the siege of Yuan Ku, and they could even take the opportunity to recover their morale. Then, they could decide whether to return to Yuzhong City to provide support or retreat to Yangjing City, and use the power of Yangjing City to liberate Yuzhong City. What if they can't reoccupy Fort Yuyang? Liu Lei couldn't help but ask himself this question. In fact, he knew better than anyone else that the success rate of the pleated sword spirit's plan was too low, probably less than 20%. Gui Yi and the others might very well go back and die. Therefore, Liu Lei personally communicated with Gui Yi and Guhan. When he found out that Guhan was also there, Zhu Wudao felt that the 20% chance had become 30%. That was why he sternly asked Guhan if he had the confidence to return to Fort Yuyang. If Guhan had said no, he would have asked Guhan to return to the main army and then think of a way to break out of the encirclement. However, since Guhan had said yes, Liu Lei decided to trust Guhan and let them do as they pleased. When he found out that Fort Yuyang had really been reclaimed by Guhan, Liu Lei was extremely excited. For Yuzhong City, it could be said that they had come back from the brink of death. They had forcefully shone a ray of light into the dark future. In his excitement, Liu Lei immediately ordered the swordbearers to speed up. That was how they managed to reach Fort Yuyang 5 minutes earlier, scaring away the 10,000 Yuan Ku vanguards. This was the entire story of Yuzhong City's operation. It could be said that it was an absolute defeat. If it weren't for Guhan leading Gui Yi and the others, who had unexpectedly reclaimed Fort Yuyang and withstood the enemy's counterattack, the human swordbearers would very likely have been completely surrounded and killed in the area around Fort Yuyang. The only organized swordbearers in Yuzhong City would also have been wiped out. Yuzhong City would really have been wiped out. It was undeniable that up until now, if anyone had contributed to this operation, the person with the most credit would undoubtedly be Zhu Wudao. The second place would be the team of 40 led by Guhan. It was them who had given the over 3,000 swordbearers hope of survival. Chapter 512. When the pleated sword spirit finished narrating the whole story without any emotion, Guhan's expression was very ugly. It was as if he had just been fished out of a pickle jar. Yuzhong City had suffered such a heavy blow. This was definitely not something that Guhan wanted to see. Moreover, Yuzhong City had already been invaded by Yuan Ku. Judging from the time, it had already been more than 3 hours. Only God knew what kind of hell Yuzhong City was in now. Master, Guhan requests to fight. Thinking of this, Guhan felt that he absolutely could not stay here any longer. He had to go to Yuzhong City. That was Guhan's home. Guhan had to stay with Yuzhong City. What do you want to fight? Liu Lei opened his eyes and looked at Guhan. If you tell me that you want to go to Yuzhong City, then shut your mouth. I will not allow you to die. Why? Ji Yuhan cried out, Master, why don't you let me go to Yuzhong City? Is it wrong for me to want to protect Yuzhong City with all my heart? Master, are you not going to help Yuzhong City after the repairs are done? Yes, you are right. I have decided that after the repairs are done, everyone will directly retreat to Yangjing City. We will not go back to Yuzhong City. It was obvious how painful Liu Lei's decision was, but he still gritted his teeth and said his decision. Guhan, we are the last hope of Yuzhong City. Yuzhong City can no longer be saved. With Loki's creation divinity, we have no chance of winning. Moreover, Loki should have only been delayed by tyrannical for a few minutes. If he had pursued us with all his strength, we would have already died under the attack of the creation divinity. But Loki did not appear. I suspect that he has already taken the creation divinity to Yuzhong City and can't wait to destroy Yuzhong City. Now, Yuzhong City is most likely. Liu Lei could not continue, but the meaning of his words was clear. Liu Lei believed that Yuzhong City might have already been destroyed by the attack of the creation divinity. No, Master, I don't think so. Guhan retorted loudly, since Loki already had the Imperial Zergs, why didn't he attack Yuzhong City directly? Why did he have to lure us out first? With the Emperor Seed here, Loki can directly destroy our dimensional barrier without resorting to such tricks. Therefore, I suspect that there must be some kind of restriction on Loki using the creation divine spark. That's why he tried to hit our sword wielder and destroy him in one go. Loki didn't go after you not because he went directly to Yuzhong City, but because his creation divine spark is in a state of cooldown. He can't use it even if he wants to. This is our chance. If we can return to Yuzhong City and gather all the forces in Yuzhong City, we will definitely have a chance to turn the tide. Guhan advised sincerely, Master, opportunities and hope are not given by the heavens. They are fought for by us humans. If humans didn't fight, they would have been wiped out 1,000 years ago. If they didn't fight, how could there be the current situation? Master, even if we die, we have to die in Yuzhong City. Master, I beg you, let's kill our way back to Yuzhong City. Hearing Guhan's analysis, Liu Lei was silent. He had to admit that what Guhan said made sense. There might be a chance of survival if they killed their way back, but it was only a chance of survival. It was more likely that they would have to sacrifice the last 3,000 fire seeds in Yuzhong City. If Liu Lei was only responsible for himself, then he would definitely kill his way back. Just like Guhan said, even if he died, he wanted to die in Yuzhong City. But now, Liu Lei was shouldering the lives of 3,000 sword-bearers. His decision was no longer up to him. No, you can't. In the end, Liu Lei still made such a decision. After resting for 2 hours, everyone will immediately retreat to Yangjing City. I have already sent a request for help to His Majesty Haotian. His Majesty Haotian has personally come to meet us. In 2 hours, we will be able to meet with His Majesty Haotian. His Majesty Haotian will come. Hearing this news, Guhan was shocked. He immediately said, Master, this is our chance to counterattack. With His Majesty Haotian here, even if Loki has the godhead of creation, there is nothing to be afraid of. With His Majesty Haotian's help, we can definitely take back Yuzhang City. Why should we escape? If His Majesty Haotian could make a move, he would have done so long ago. Liu Lei sighed. Do you think that Zeus and Jehovah, who are behind Loki, are not paying attention to this battle? They have already sent a message to His Majesty Haotian. If His Majesty Haotian dares to make a move, the two of them will put aside their old grudges and attack His Majesty Haotian together. So His Majesty Haotian can only meet us and retreat. He can't directly deal with Loki. Everything depends on the strength of Yuzhang City. Do you understand? I understand. Guhan nodded and said weakly. Although Zeus and Jehovah were allies, they were also opponents who were most wary of each other. Under normal circumstances, they could not even fight each other, let alone work together. Only under such circumstances would they force themselves to join forces and threaten Haotian Jendi. If you understand, then go. Don't worry, Yuzhang City will be rebuilt sooner or later. When that time comes, Guhan, you will be our greatest strength. The whole of Yuzhang City will look forward to you. Liu Lei said sincerely. No, Master, I'm very sorry. I don't want to wait until the future, and I don't want to go to Yangjing City to struggle at death's door. This disciple is not Master. Master, you have 3,000 brothers behind you, but this disciple does not. This disciple must return to Yuzhang City. With that, Ji Yuhan bowed to Liu Lei and was about to leave the command hall. Stop right there. Liu Lei stood up and shouted. Guhan, you are my last hope. I can't let you die in Yuzhang City. Stop right there. Master, I am your last hope, but Yuzhang City was your first hope. I'm sorry, Master. I can't listen to you anymore. Guhan said and continued to walk forward. Guhan, what do you want? Do you want to anger Master Yun Xiao to death? Suddenly, a middle-aged mature woman blocked in front of Guhan. Looking at the 4 scabbards on her body, she was actually a spirit sword level sword holder. This mature female spirit sword level sword holder sneered. I know you, Guhan. You think you're very powerful, right? You want to be a hero who will live and die with Yuzhang City, right? Do you think you're great? Do you know that you're actually the culprit of everything that happened today? Your sword spirit Mu Shui. Guhan recalled the information in his mind and remembered the name of this mature female spirit sword level sword holder. As one of the few female spirit sword level sword holders in Yuzhang City, sword spirit Mu Shui had left a deep impression on Guhan. This woman's reputation on the internet had always been bad because her words were very harsh and not liked by other sword holders. May I ask, Master, why do you say that I'm the culprit of all this? Guhan frowned. To put it bluntly, I'm the hero. Without me, you guys would have been wrapped up like dumplings. Use your brain and think, why did we have to do this today? Sword Spirit Mu Shui's face was full of harsh anger. It's all because of you, you brought false information. What Loki is digging up Emperor Zerg's in the Mai Ling mountain range? This is clearly a trap that Loki set for us. He already had Emperor Zerg's and deliberately released the super electromagnetic gun to tell you this news. It was to lure our troops over so that he could use the creation god spark to destroy us in one fell swoop. Can't you see? It's all because of you. It's because of your brainlessness and your wrong information that Lord Baiju, Yuzhang City, and all of us were harmed. Sword Spirit Mu Shui spoke incessantly. In her words, the source of all the blame was on Guhan and everything was Guhan's fault. Enough, shut up. Liu Lei slammed the chair forcefully to make Sword Spirit Mu Shui shut her mouth. However, at this moment, Guhan lowered his head and did not say a word. It was as if Sword Spirit Mu Shui's words had hit a sore spot in his heart. In a sense, Guhan was indeed responsible for what had happened today. It was also because of his information that today's tragedy had occurred. Ji Han, don't listen to Mu Shue's words. She was just agitated for a moment and spoke without thinking. The responsibility for this matter does not lie with you. Liu Lei let out a long sigh and went to Ji Han's side to console him. Gu Han looked cold and emotionless, but Gu Han was a good child. He was responsible and a hero. However, heroes were often short-tempered and liked to put the blame on themselves. This Gu Han must not take the initiative to put the blame on himself. How could a little fellow like him bear such a heavy responsibility? If he really felt that these disasters were caused by his mistake, he would definitely collapse from the moral condemnation. This was not a scene that Liu Lei wanted to see. Sword Spirit Mu Shui. After Liu Lei consoled him a few words, Gu Han raised his head and faced this woman. I will never shirk my responsibility if it's me, Gu Han. If it's not me, Gu Han, then no one else can push the blame on me. If I didn't report this information, would you have known about the creation divinity? If I didn't report this information, then wouldn't everyone be waiting for death in Yuzhang City? It doesn't matter if my information is true or false, or if it's Loki's trap. It's an indisputable fact that Loki has the creation divinity. It's also a fact that he can use the power of the creation divinity. If I didn't tell you, Loki would have broken through Yuzhang City sooner or later. Don't even think about making me, Gu Han, take the blame for this. Ji Han forcefully pushed Mu Shue's sword spirit away, then walked out step by step. He didn't even turn his head back, he just left like that. This brat, he's rebelling. My lord, I'll go catch him, Mu Shui said and was about to grab Gu Han back. Let him be. Liu Lei called out to the Mu Shui sword spirit, leaving behind a sentence that made one reminisce. Young people should have a bit of passion, unlike us old people who only consider benefits. If he really is the darling of the times, the future Jendi, then this matter won't take his life. Instead, it will make him stronger. Every Jendi goes through this. If he survives, he becomes an emperor. If he dies, he's still a real man. Let him go. In fact, Liu Lei only dared to think about it. He didn't dare to have even a 1% chance of success. What if Gu Han really saves Yuzhang City? Chapter 513. Gu Han, are you really going back to Yuzhang City? Gu Yi rushed out of the command hall. When he saw Gu Han was already standing on top of the Fort Yang's walls. Below the walls, outside the dimensional barrier, were close to 100,000 yuan coup. I've already said it in the command hall. You don't have to persuade me anymore. Gu Han did not give Gu Yi a chance to persuade him. You've misunderstood me. I'm not trying to persuade you. Gu Yi shook his head. I want to go with you. Go with me. Gu Han turned his head and stared into Gu Yi's eyes. I'm also a sword bearer of Yuzhang City. My parents and siblings are all in Yuzhang City. If they're gone, I don't want to live anymore, so I have to return to Yuzhang City. Just like you said, even if I die, I want to die in Yuzhang City. To think that Gu Yi would say something like this. I understand what you mean. Gu Han patted Gu Yi's shoulder. But I can't bring you there. Stay here at Fort Yang and help your master. By the way, you can tell me your family's address and appearance. If I happen to pass by your house or see your family, I'll save them. Why don't you bring me along? Gu Yi panicked. I don't need you to help me save them. I want to save my family myself. What a joke. Look at how many yuan coup there are here. Ji Han held the Gu Yi scroll and looked down from the city walls. Over 100,000 yuan silhouettes had surrounded the entire Fort Yuyang. There wasn't a single gap to be seen. In the past, Ji Han didn't really understand why the generals on TV liked to describe how tight their encirclement was by saying that even an ant couldn't climb out. Now, Ji Han understood. Indeed, this was the only way to describe the current situation of Fort Yuyang. Gu Han brought Gu Yi to look around, then sneered. Let me ask you. What's the difference between me bringing you out of here and helping you save your family? Furthermore, I personally believe that bringing you out of here is much more difficult than rescuing someone. If you have the ability, then rush out yourself. I won't stop you. If you don't have the ability, then don't bother me here. I don't want to bring a burden like you along. Gu Yi was completely beaten black and blue by Guhan's words, and he didn't feel good at all. Because Guhan was right. It would be much more difficult to get him out of here than to save people in Yuzhang City. If he forced himself to follow Guhan, he would only be a burden to Guhan. But Guhan, can you not be so direct? Can't you be a little more tactful? Won't you consider my feelings? Gu Yi grumbled in his heart. Fine, I won't be a burden to you. But you have to tell me, how do you plan to get out of here? I'm afraid that only Master Liu Lei can break an opening in this formation. Gu Yi asked Guhan in confusion. Right now, there were not a few thousand yuan ku surrounding Fort Yeyang, but about 100,000 yuan ku. Even if 10 of Guhan were thrown into this formation, they would turn into a pile of bones in no time. He really did not understand how Guhan was going to break out. Walking out is a little more difficult, so I want to fly out. Guhan took out the maglev motorcycle Liunian Ling gave him from his dimensional pocket, then took out the 2 large pieces of alloy he stole from the top of a building in Fort Yeyang. He didn't know if everyone had forgotten, but Guhan had once assembled a flying motorcycle on the top of a building. That's right, in just a few days, this flying motorcycle had appeared once again. This was the first time Gu Yi had seen someone in this world with the imagination to build a maglev flying motorcycle. He had to admit that he was impressed by Guhan. In terms of intelligence, he would never be able to surpass Guhan in this lifetime. However, compared to the last time with the flying motorcycle, the situation now was a little different. First, the last time was on the top of a relatively wide building. The flying motorcycle could accelerate and glide from a distance of 100 meters. However, on the city wall, the width was only a short 5 meters, so there was no room for a run-up. Second, the last time the roof was a few hundred meters high, so after gliding, they could fly at least 5 kilometers horizontally. However, the current height of the city wall was less than 60 meters, so it would be difficult for them to fly 600 meters. Moreover, the main force of Yuan Ku's army had already extended to a distance of 2 kilometers from Fort Yeyang. Third, there were no flying units among the zombies last time, so there was nothing Guhan could do against the airborne zombies. But now it was different. There were hundreds of blazing phoenixes circling above Guhan's head, and in the distant sky, there were even wyverns. With these aerial units, Guhan's journey in the air would not be as smooth as before. Of course, in the face of these difficulties, Ji Yuhan had his own solutions. The problem of the lack of width was the best solution. After all, the flying motorcycle could fly about 3 meters above the ground, which was enough to ignore the battlements of the city wall. The motorcycle only needed to run a lap around the entire city wall to reach its maximum speed. Guhan waved to Gu Yi, then drove the hoverbike around the city wall once, then looked in the direction of Yuzhang City and jumped off the city wall, leaving a beautiful curve in the sky. Unfortunately, the Yuan Kus immediately noticed this curve. The Yuan Kus on the ground began to make a ruckus, constantly pouncing upwards, trying to catch Guhan in the air. Of course, these Yuan Kus would not be able to catch Guhan before Guhan landed. Guhan's biggest threat was the blazing phoenixes circling in the sky. A group of blazing phoenixes closest to Guhan began to dive down, their sharp beaks slightly opened, and a red flame began to gather within. Blazing phoenixes. From the name alone, one could tell that they were fire-attributed magical beasts. Fire-type magic was their forte. The temperature of each fireball in their beaks could reach more than 5,000 degrees, and ordinary water could not extinguish these flames. If these fireballs were shot near Guhan, putting aside the question of whether Guhan could withstand the flames, the maglev motorcycle alone would not be able to withstand them. So, Guhan could not let these flames get close to him. Guhan steered the maglev motorcycle with one hand and drew his heavenly sword with the other. Without even turning his head, he released 3 beams of sword energy behind him. These beams of sword energy accurately bombarded the blazing phoenixes, and fiery red feathers flew all over the mountain. Of course, it was impossible for 3 beams of sword energy to kill the dragon-class Yuan Ku's blazing phoenixes. However, Guhan's target was not their bodies, but their wings. The blazing phoenix's wings had more or less chunks of flesh shaved off. The immense pain and loss of balance had caused the blazing phoenixes to lose the ability to fly, and they fell from the sky like plucked pheasants. The fireballs in their beaks had just finished accumulating, and they all hit Yuan Ku's head. Some of the lower-level Yuan Ku's blazing phoenixes were directly burned to ashes by the flames. After getting rid of the blazing phoenixes, the biggest threat was the large group of wyverns in front of Guhan. These wyverns were also dragon-class Yuan Kus, but unlike the long-range attacks of the blazing phoenixes, they were aerial gladiators who specialized in close-range combat. To make matters worse, Guhan had been flying for more than 20 seconds, and he was less than 10 meters away from the ground. He was still more than halfway out of Yuan Ku's encirclement. Even if the wyverns did not attack Guhan, Guhan would sooner or later land on the ground and be surrounded by Yuan Kus. However, the wyverns did not just watch from the sky because Guhan would land sooner or later. They were still very dedicated, flapping their wings and attacking Guhan. However, they did not know that their dedication had become a springboard for Guhan's escape. When the first wyvern approached Guhan, Guhan revealed a satisfied smile because his plan had been executed perfectly. The wyvern's main attack method was its pair of sharp claws, so the wyvern's first reaction was to use its sharp claws to grab Guhan's neck. However, it did not expect that the moment its claws were about to grab Guhan's neck, Guhan would suddenly let go of the hoverbike's handle and jump up from the motorcycle. After jumping up, he took the initiative to grab the wyvern's claws. In the blink of an eye, he had jumped onto the wyvern's back and stood on its body. His hoverbike could only helplessly be thrown to the ground by Guhan, and a loud noise erupted. When the wyvern felt that someone was standing on its back, its first reaction was to do a 180-degree turn and throw the human off its back. Guhan had completely seen through the wyvern's reaction. The moment the wyvern was about to flip, Guhan jumped from its back and landed on the back of another wyvern beside him. In the blink of an eye, this group of wyverns had become Guhan's stepping board. The duckweed in the sky, Guhan was like a frog, jumping around on these sky duckweeds. Often, before the wyvern could feel someone stepping on its back, that person had already left its back and landed on another wyvern. In a short while, Guhan's figure had blended into the group of wyverns, and not a trace of sound could be heard anymore. Only Gui Yi, who was on the city wall, stared dumbfoundedly at Guhan's fancy breakthroughs. No wonder Guhan was unwilling to bring him along. He could not even stand firmly on the wyvern's back, let alone jump. If he really followed, it would be a dead end, a 100% dead end. Chapter 5:14. Your Holiness. That human has escaped from our encirclement. Should we follow him and eliminate him? In the deepest part of Yuan Ku's army, a Saint Seiya who was surrounded by a dozen or so Saint Seiyas asked Hercules for his opinion. That human seems to be with Misaka Mikoto. Looks like he'll be the one to occupy Fort Yaeyang after I leave. Recalling the scene of Ji Yu Han jumping on the back of the wyvern in his mind, Hercules revealed a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. Why should I care about him? Our job is done. The rest is up to Loki. He tricked me. I'm not a despicable person. Why should I treat him as my friend? Why should I help him stop this interesting guy? Hercules waved his hand and a void door appeared out of thin air. Let's go. My battle is over, and the rest is Loki's own business. With a bomb in hand, if Loki can still lose, then he, Loki, should quickly go back with his brother. After that, Hercules disappeared into the midst of Yuan Ku's army with his Saint Seiyas. The army of 100,000 was at a loss. Having lost their commander, they did not even know if they should continue to seal off Fort Yaeyang. On the other hand, Guhan, who had escaped from Fort Yaeyang, was finally on his way back to Yuzhong City. However, he was still 200 kilometers away from Yuzhong City. If he were to run on foot, it would take him at least 3 to 4 hours to reach Yuzhong City. Since Guhan's only means of transportation was destroyed in the leap, it seemed like he could only walk. Of course, it was impossible for him to walk. If Guhan arrived a minute earlier, he could have saved a human's life. Moreover, Guhan did not plan to fight his way in alone. After all, he was a Grandmaster-level swordsman. Fighting his way in alone was no different from digging his own grave. Therefore, Yuhan had to find a few helpers, and they had to be powerful helpers. In fact, it wasn't hard to find these helpers. Yuhan already had 3 of them, and they were all at the universe realm. When Guhan and Liuyan Ling parted ways to escort Misaka Mikoto, Guhan had ordered the 3 Egyptian gods to protect Liuyan Ling and the rest in secret. If the powerful Yuan Ku threatened Liuyan Ling and the rest, they were to save Liuyan Ling and the rest even if they had to expose their identities. This was also the reason why Guhan did not summon the 3 Egyptian gods to help him when he was fighting in the Nanjing city ruins. It was because the 3 Egyptian gods were no longer by Guhan's side. When Guhan returned to Fort Yuyang, he had already regained his connection with the 3 Egyptian gods. That was why Guhan dared to do all kinds of incredible missions. If he really could not do it, he still had the 3 Wu-level Yuan Kus to help him. No matter how difficult the situation was, the 3 Wu-level Yuan Kus would be able to solve the crisis in front of Guhan. However, unless it was a life-and-death crisis, Guhan would not let the 3 of them come out. Now that Guhan wanted to return to Yuzhang City alone, who knew what kind of danger he would encounter in Yuzhang City? Yuzhang City was not like Fort Yuyang. Even if the 3 Wu-level Yuan Kus were to hide outside Fort Yuyang, they could enter Fort Yuyang to support Guhan at any time. However, Yuzhang City was too big. If the 3 Egyptian gods were to hide outside Yuzhang City, who knew how long it would take for them to reach Guhan's side? Therefore, Guhan decided to keep the 3 Egyptian gods by his side. This time, his opponent could be Loki, the god of creation. Every second could be the difference between life and death, so Guhan could not afford to be reckless. Grandmaster, the 3rd paw has discovered a void fluctuation approaching us. A small head suddenly popped out of Guhan's hair. Then, the other 7 heads popped out as well. The 8 fairies had been hiding in Guhan's hair all this time. Ever since they entered Fort Yuyang, these 8 fairies had been hiding in Guhan's hair. No matter how intense Guhan's battle was, they never came out of his hair. It was as if they were wearing safety belts on their bodies. It was very magical. These 8 fairies seemed to have a divine ability to hide in hair. As long as it was hair, even if it was very short hair, these 8 fairies could hide in it without anyone noticing. Even Liu Lei, a sword wielder at the celestial sword tier, didn't notice the 8 fairies hidden in Guhan's hair. Actually, compared to hiding in his hair, Guhan preferred that they could be hidden in his scabbard like the sword mistress, or in his dimensional pocket. However, these 8 fairies had a great natural resistance to dimensional space. No matter what, they were unwilling to enter the dimensional space. Helpless, Guhan could only let them stay in his hair. As long as they were not in any danger and did not affect his battle, he would let them stay in his hair. Now that they were out of Fort Yuyang, Guhan had returned to his solitary state. These 8 fairies could finally poke their heads out to play. Wait, since these 8 fairies had been staying in his hair all this time, didn't that mean they were also eyewitnesses? Eyewitnesses who had seen him do it. Guhan suddenly thought of this. He was about to ask the 8 fairies if they had seen anything inappropriate when the void beside Guhan opened up. A woman and 2 men walked out of the void gate. The woman was a gorgeous young lady wearing a red leather jacket. Her appearance was above average, but her figure was extremely alluring. Her body was voluptuous. Under the leather jacket, her curves were perfectly outlined. Her pair of épées were especially eye-catching, as if they were about to burst out of the leather jacket. As for the 2 men, one was fat and one was thin, one was black and one was fair. They were 2 complete extremes. The white one was elegant and perfect. Every move he made had the temperament of a noble young master. His appearance was so handsome that even the heavens would be jealous of him. The flawless lava was like the perfect Prince Charming in the hearts of countless women. As for the black one, he was the other extreme. The best adjectives to describe him were the words I'm an idiot written all over his sharp face. Without a doubt, these 3 were the 3 Egyptian gods under Guhan. After Guhan unlocked the seal in their divinity and restored their universe-level strength, they could appear in this world in their divine form. They no longer had to maintain their original appearance. Wow! 8 fairies, long time no see. When did you guys come? Unexpectedly, after seeing the 8 fairies, Ice took the initiative to greet them as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. In addition to Ice, Anubis and Bastet also looked familiar. Obviously, they all knew the 8 fairies. This was very interesting. The 8 fairies came to Guhan when the 3 Egyptian gods left Guhan. Before that, they had no interaction with the 3 Egyptian gods. How did they know the 8 fairies? And they looked so familiar. However, the 8 fairies didn't know the 3 Egyptian gods at all. She grabbed a few strands of hair on Guhan's head and looked at the 3 Egyptian gods with vigilance and fear. Then, she suddenly stuck out her tongue at them. The 8 little guys dove back into Guhan's hair. Have you seen them in the past? Guhan wasn't stupid. He vaguely guessed why the 3 Egyptian gods knew the 8 fairies. Could it be that when he traveled to the past in the future, he brought the 8 fairies with him? This wasn't strange. If the 8 fairies had been living in his hair, he would have brought them with him wherever he went. He couldn't get rid of them even if he wanted to. I can't say. Master Guhan, it's better for you to explore these things yourself. Otherwise, everything will be messed up. Bastet laughed and glossed over this matter. He faced the void gate that was still open and made an inviting gesture like a housekeeper. Master, please enter the void gate. I have already left a mark outside Yuzhang City. It will only take 10 minutes for us to arrive outside Yuzhang City. The Void Gate was a power that only immortal sword wielders and universe-level Yuan Ku and above could control. They could move quickly in the real world through the void world that was parallel to the real world. However, it was easy to enter the void world, but it was troublesome to get out. To open the Void Gate that led to one's destination in the void world, one had to leave one's mark at that location in the real world. Only with the help of the mark could one open the Void Gate at the correct location. Otherwise, one might get lost in the void world and be trapped there for the rest of their lives. This was not a joke. According to human records, there were at least 10 immortal sword wielders who couldn't come out after entering the void world for various reasons. They became legends of being lost in the void world. Their experiences told everyone how important it was to leave a mark in the void world. There was not much to describe when traveling in the void world. It felt like a train traveling through a tunnel. It was just that a long stretch of darkness flashed by. Bastet found the mark he had left and reopened the Void Gate, allowing Guhan to step into the real world once again. Coming out of the void world, Guhan felt slightly dizzy. When he tried his best to get rid of this dizziness, the Grand Yuzhang City appeared in front of Guhan's eyes. That's great. The dimensional barrier is still there. At first glance, Guhan saw that the super-dimensional barrier surrounding Yuzhang City was still there. Outside the dimensional barrier, there was no Yuan Ku's army. At least on the surface, Yuzhang City still looked calm. However, deep in Yuzhang City, in the core area, black smoke filled the sky. Clearly, Yuzhang City had blossomed internally. Chapter 5:15. On the city wall, a group of swordbearers were looking nervously at the bottom of the city wall. They were staring at the world outside the city wall, but they also had to pay attention to the world inside the city wall. According to the rules of Yuzhang City, the swordbearers guarding the city wall had to focus all their attention outside the city. Without the direct order of the Sword Council, the troops guarding the city wall were not allowed to take a step out of the city wall. But at this time, the core area was already a sea of fire, so they had no choice but to focus on the core area. The core area had been on fire for 3 hours, but they still didn't know what had happened in these 3 hours. No one told them, and no one gave them any orders. They couldn't leave the city wall because once they did, there would be no one guarding the gate of Yuzhang City. If Yuan Ku attacked again at that time, wouldn't there be no one to inform him? But at this time, the communication system in Yuzhang City could no longer be used, because the base station of the personal terminal had been destroyed. The BAT system could no longer control the communication between the personal terminals. At this time, the personal terminals had degenerated into something similar to a walkie-talkie. If you knew the unique identification code of the other party's personal terminal, you could still contact the holder of the personal terminal. If you didn't know the unique identification code of the other party, the personal terminal would be useless. In short, more than 1,000 swordbearers responsible for guarding the city wall had lost contact with the core area. Their original boss was trapped in the core area and hadn't appeared. They couldn't even find someone who could command them now. These guards were at a loss. They wanted to rush back to the core area, but because of their resignation, the whole of Yuzhong City had fallen. Just as they were in a dilemma, they saw a person appear at the city gate. Release the lift. I have an order from Sword Immortal Cloudy Sky. Release the lift and bring me up, Guhan shouted from below the city wall. The sword-bearers on the city wall looked at each other, joy welling up in their hearts. Great, Sword Immortal Cloudy Sky finally had an order. Yuzhong City was finally not without a leader. An elevator slowly descended from the city wall. Under the siege of Yuan-ku, the city gates were not allowed to be opened. If people outside the city wanted to enter, they could only do so through the elevator on the city wall. The sword-wielding guards didn't suspect that Guhan was Yuan-ku because Guhan walked in directly from outside the dimensional barrier. The dimensional barrier didn't stop Guhan at all, which meant that Guhan was indeed human and not Yuan-ku. This was because it was impossible for Yuan-ku to pass through the dimensional barrier. Even if Yuan-ku hid in the void or sneaked through a dimensional space, he would still be blocked by the dimensional barrier. Since ancient times, there had never been a case of Yuan-ku successfully sneaking through the dimensional barrier. After Guhan entered the city wall through the lift, the nearby swordbearers all surrounded him and asked him questions. "Brother, you came from outside the city. Is there news from our army? I understand. Brother, you must be the vanguard, right? Our army will be back soon, right? Brother, you're finally here. Only God knows what happened in the core area, and we can't leave the city wall. We're so worried. By the way, you said Sword Immortal Cloudy Sky has an order. What is it? Hurry up and tell us. The army is being held back by Yuan-ku's main force at the bottom of the Miling mountain range. Sword Immortal Cloudy Sky sent me back to tell everyone not to panic. As long as we take care of Yuan-ku in the Miling mountain range, the army will immediately return to Yuzhong City, Guhan said with certainty, as if Liu Lei could really return to Yuzhong City immediately. Of course, what Guhan said was a lie, but Guhan had to lie. He couldn't tell these sword-bearers that Liu Lei had decided to give up Yuzhong City and go to Yangjing City to regroup. He was afraid that once the news spread, the morale of the 1,000 soldiers here would immediately drop. They might even escape from the city gate and go to Yangjing City together. Therefore, Guhan had to stabilize the morale of the entire Yuzhong City. Sure enough, the army would soon return. Everyone was relieved. They thought that the army had failed, which was why there was chaos in the core area. Now that it seemed that the army was fine, they could completely rest assured. As long as the army was still here, they could guard the city wall with peace of mind. Brothers, what's the situation in Yuzhong City now? Guhan looked at the flames in the core area in the distance. He was surprised to find that the flames seemed to be limited to the core area. The ordinary areas were not threatened. We don't know what happened. We just heard that Yuan-ku broke into the core area and killed people and set fire to it. But isn't this a fantasy? We have been guarding the city gate. If Yuan-ku broke into the core area, how could he hide it from us? Unless all of us are dead, Yuan-ku can forget about breaking in through the gate, the sword-bearers said resolutely. Obviously, they were very confident in the city gate they were guarding. Sorry. I'm afraid that Yuan-ku did not come in through the gate, but directly entered the core area through the quantum transmission array. Guhan did not choose to hide the news. Instead, he directly told them about the quantum transmission array. For a moment, the entire city wall was in chaos. What? You mean to say that Yuan-ku is really causing trouble in the core area? Are you kidding me? You must be kidding us. Brother, this is not funny at all. How could the quantum transmission array be used by Yuan-ku? Could it be that those guys guarding the quantum teleportation array are all idiots? The sword-bearers suddenly panicked. They all said that Guhan was kidding them. They could not believe that the core area, which they thought was the safest, had been captured by Yuan Ku. Then why were they still guarding the city wall? Their parents, brothers, wives, and children were all in the core area. However, the monstrous fire in the core area would not lie. If it was not Yuan Ku causing trouble, how could there be a monstrous fire in the core area? These sword-bearers were just unwilling to believe it at first. But when the truth was placed in front of them, they had no choice but to believe it. One of the sword-bearers screamed as if he had gone crazy. He was about to rush down the city wall. Zui. My Zui. Dad is coming to save you. It seemed that he had gone crazy because he was worried about the safety of his family. This person's madness seemed to be a signal. Most of the sword-bearers began to move, ready to rush down the city wall and rush back to the core area to save their loved ones. Stop. Stop right there. Guhan flashed and stood in front of the sword-bearers. Listen to me. Rushing back to the core area like this is suicide. Not only will you not be able to save your loved ones, you will also waste your lives. Bastard, you can't defend the quantum transmission array and put our loved ones in danger. What right do you have to lecture us? Get out of the way, we have already wasted a few hours. We can't wait any longer. Get out of the way. Everyone, listen to me. I am not trying to stop you. I just hope that you will not forget that you are soldiers. Soldiers should work together to fight and not die one by one. Only by clenching your fists will you be able to exert the greatest power. I will give you 1 minute. Within 1 minute, regroup your teams and send me your team leader's identification number. Listen to my command and enter the core area together to protect our families. Guhan said quickly. In just a few words, he actually wanted to take over the command of these 1,000 sword-bearers. Was it that simple? Of course it was not that simple. Because he had 3 scabbards on him, Guhan looked like a famed sword-rank sword-bearer. However, there were more than 30 famed sword-rank sword-bearers on the city wall. Why would they listen to Guhan's command? Why would they believe that Guhan could lead them to save Yuzhang City? After all, Guhan looked like a child who had not even grown his pubic hair yet. Immediately, a few famed sword-rank sword-bearers stepped forward. They looked at Guhan coldly and said, "We admit that what you said is very reasonable. We should clench our fists, but what right does a child like you have to command us? Why should we believe that you have received orders from Sword Immortal Cloud Mist? Either you get out of here now or you give us a written order from Sword Immortal Cloud Mist. Otherwise, we will choose our own commander and you can do whatever you want." They asked Guhan for Liu Lei's written order. Of course, Guhan did not have it. He had disobeyed Liu Lei's orders and come here. How could he have Liu Lei's written order? Order? I don't have it. Guhan shook his head and took a step back. He said calmly, "Well then, according to what you said just now, you can choose a commander." The sword-bearer snorted disdainfully and began to arrange for the selection of a commander. However, when it was time for the selection, they realized that they could not find a commander who could convince the masses. If they wanted to convince the masses, they must have a good record. After all, this was putting everyone's lives in the hands of the commander. However, all the sword-bearers on the city wall were veterans who had been guarding the city wall of Yuzhang City for a long time. These old people might be good at guarding the city wall, but at the same time, they had lost the opportunity to make contributions outside. Therefore, very few of them had a good record. There were only a few sword-bearers with some achievements, but they could not really convince the other sword-bearers. This time, they were going to the core area to rescue people. This battle was bound to be a disaster. All the sword-bearers were unwilling to entrust their lives to incompetent people. All of a sudden, the election was delayed for about 5 minutes. Normally, the election of a class monitor would take 45 minutes to decide. Now, only 5 minutes had passed, which was not a long time. However, the situation now was different. Every second of delay could put the lives of these sword-bearers in danger. Perhaps their loved ones would die in these 5 minutes. These sword-bearers had reached the limit of their patience after waiting for 5 minutes. Everyone began to get restless again. Some people even shouted, "We don't want a unified command. We want to save our loved ones by ourselves. The famous swordbearer who proposed the selection was already panicking and sweating. The whole situation was about to be completely out of control. Everyone. Since you can't find a commander that everyone can trust, how about I recommend you a commander? I promise that as long as you hear his name, you will be willing to accept his command. At this time, Guhan stood up again and spoke in a voice that almost everyone could hear. After a few seconds of silence. Who is it? Who are you talking about? Everyone's eyes fell on Guhan. His name is Military Governor. Guhan paused, the military governor in Sword Maiden Online. The military governor who defeated 10,000 people with 200 people. Chapter 5:16. As soon as the military governor's name was mentioned, all the anxious swordbearers fell silent. They looked at the people around them blankly, as if asking, is the military governor really among us? Of course, there were also people who didn't play online games who looked at their friends blankly, asking who the military governor was. In the end, their friends pulled their sleeves and answered, don't worry about who the military governor is. You just need to know that if the military governor is really here, we have hope of winning. You're not kidding, are you? Is the military governor really here? One of the swordbearers questioned, if he's here, then who the hell is he? How can you say that he's the military governor? I'm the military governor. The military governor is me. Guhan's voice was as loud as thunder in winter, blasting the ears of all the swordbearers. This person is the military governor. He actually said he's the military governor. Words are no proof. Do you have any evidence to prove that you're the military governor? The swordbearers gulped and questioned. I'm sorry that I can't connect to the internet or have any conclusive evidence, but I think these things should be enough to prove my identity. Guhan took a slight step forward. Coupled with his imposing manner, all the swordbearers on the scene unconsciously took a small step back. With this imposing manner alone, Guhan stood proudly above everyone on the scene. Take a look for yourselves. Guhan waved his hand and a series of information was projected on his personal terminal. Dear player military governor, someone in the game has read the paid post posted by your sub-account, Military Governor 12580 in the forum. I'm the military governor. Let me tell you how to get the SSS rating. I think it's very good and have tipped you 588 yuan. After deducting 20% of the personal income tax, your account has been automatically transferred 474 yuan. Hundreds and thousands of such messages were constantly being projected in the air, stunning all the onlookers. The content of these messages was sufficient to prove that Guhan was the owner of the military governor account. And the source of the information was all standard BAT account management, which was the system's automatic transfer. There was no suspicion of falsification. At least in a personal terminal, which was a closed terminal, it was difficult to create such fake information. You really are the military governor. One of the players raised his head. His eyes were no longer confused. Instead, he looked at Guhan with bright eyes. Can we entrust our lives and the lives of our loved ones to you? This was the swordsman's question, as well as the question of all the swordsmen present. They were all looking at Guhan, at the man named military governor in the game, and at how he would answer this crucial question. Guhan knew that at this time, he had to give everyone confidence. Even if he did not have the slightest confidence, he could not show it at this time. He had to give everyone a decisive answer. When have I ever failed? Guhan smiled. The military governor never fails. In Yuzhang City, in the ordinary district, a large number of civilians stood on the street. They were at a loss as they looked at the raging flames in the core area. They did not understand what had happened in the core area. They all gathered on the street and pointed at the core area. Why don't these civilians enter the sanctuary? Why are they gathering on the street? Are they waiting for Yuan Ku to kill them? Seeing these civilians gathering here, Guhan was filled with anger. Even 3 months ago, Guhan was also one of the civilians. I'm afraid it's not that they don't want to enter the sanctuary. It's because the sanctuary has not been opened. The switches for the sanctuary are all set in the core area. Once the core area falls, the sanctuary in the ordinary district cannot be opened. A middle-aged man named Young Jiahua, who looked to be in his 40s and was acting as Guhan's assistant, said, "That's right." Although he had the name Jiahua, he was indeed a middle-aged man. This was the assistant that Guhan had directly accepted. He was only an ancient sword wielder and did not have any outstanding achievements. He had been working in various basic government departments all his life and was laughed at for being a piece of trash who did not dare to go out and fight. But it was this piece of trash that Guhan had appointed him as his assistant. At first, it caused a lot of dissatisfaction, but Guhan's reason made those who opposed him speechless. Moreover, they admired Guhan even more. Guhan said that since this young Jiahua had worked in all the departments, he must be very familiar with Yuzhong City. In the situation where the network was interrupted and the central database could not be linked, Guhan was the team's walking dictionary, walking map, and walking database. Only by understanding all the information about Yuzhong City could he make the most accurate judgment. Soon, young Jiahua showed her value to everyone. The city wall was dozens of kilometers away from the core area. Even if the army marched at full speed, it would probably take an hour. However, Ji Han did not have an hour to waste. Guhan immediately ordered the team to go to the nearest public transport hub and use the public transport to go to the core area. But according to the map, the nearest public transport hub was more than 10 kilometers away. There was no difference between going there and going to the core area. Yang Jiahua immediately told Guhan that there was a small public transport hub not far from the city wall. There were hundreds of maglev public transport buses in it. As long as they drove the public transport buses out, they would be able to quickly go to the core area. According to the location reported by Yang Jiahua, this small transport hub was really well hidden. It was hidden under a large number of high-rise buildings. People who had not worked in the public transport dispatch center would not know the existence of such a public transport hub. Therefore, Guhan drove the team directly to the entrance of the public transport hub. Then, he ordered 5 small teams of 100 people to enter the public transport hub and drive 50 public transport buses out. Guhan only gave the 5 teams 3 minutes to drive the buses, but after 5 minutes, there was still no bus coming out. What's going on? Guhan barged into the public transport hub and saw the 100 sword bearers he had sent over standing next to the garage with helpless expressions. There were also hundreds of ordinary people who were grabbing the sword bearers' sleeves or hugging their legs tightly. There were also some people who simply lay down in front of the hovercraft, refusing to let the sword bearers get on. "Sir Military Governor, we tried to persuade them to use these hovercraft buses to fight in the core area, but these staff don't understand us. They won't let us drive the hovercraft away no matter what. They said that without the head office's order, they wouldn't dare to hand over the hovercraft buses to us. Otherwise, the head office will blame it on them," a small team leader explained. He was also the one who was hugged the most tightly. A total of 3 people were hugging him, causing him to be unable to move at all. "Sir, please pity us office workers. If we lose these buses, we won't be able to pay for it even if we kill ourselves." Seeing that a higher-ranking official had arrived, these staff members immediately gave up on the small team leader and hugged Guhan's legs. "Sir, please let us go. Don't touch the hovercraft buses here. Without the head office's order, we really can't give them to you. Let go of me." Guhan's expression was as cold as frost. "We are using your buses to save people. Our compatriots in the core area are being slaughtered by Yuan Ku. We are doing this to save everyone's lives. Don't worry, if you really lose the buses, I'll get the sword committee to talk to your head office and ask them to waive the compensation fees. Sir, please let us go. You said it so nicely." Those sword bearers who came 12 years ago also said the same thing, but in the end, the head office still forced all of us to pay for it. They deducted 70% of our wages for 12 years, and we still haven't paid it off. If you take away another 100, we won't be able to pay it off for the rest of our lives. My lord, be merciful, and have pity on us poor wretches. This person spoke earnestly. It turned out that during the Great Invasion 12 years ago, there were also sword bearers who used this place to take public transport. In the end, for some reason, The head office of the public transport company still put the blame on these employees and actually deducted 70% of their wages for a whole 12 years. It was no wonder these employees were so resistant to Ji Yuhan's recruitment. However, Gu Han did not think that the sword bearers did not report this to the sword committee. Even if they forgot to report it, wouldn't the workers complain? Could it be that the council would not send someone to investigate the cause of the matter? In Yuzhang City, where there were surveillance cameras everywhere, it was easy to find out if there were sword bearers who used the buses. Gu Han did not believe that the sword committee and council would be stingy enough to blame these ordinary people for the losses. There must be something wrong with the public transport company that caused these people to live in hardship for 12 years. Although Gu Han had somewhat understood them, it was still a big problem for them to cling to his leg and prevent him from using the buses. Every second was precious to Gu Han. The relatives of these sword bearers were still waiting for them in the core area. With this in mind, Gu Han persuaded them one last time, "This is my personal information. After this is over, I will accompany you to the public transport company to explain the situation. I promise I won't ask for compensation. Please rest assured now. Every second you delay, one of our compatriots will die in the core area." The old man hesitated for a while and looked at his colleagues around him. He then shook his head and continued to cling to Gu Han's leg, unwilling to let go. "Why can't you guys understand what I'm saying? We need these buses to save people. If you don't give us the buses, how are we going to get to the core area? You're only losing some money, but the core area is losing lives." The leader of the sword bearers roared. "Other people's lives have nothing to do with us. Without the money, there's no point in living." The old man's stubborn temper flared up. "Aren't you the sword bearers? Aren't you the best of the best? Aren't you all omnipotent? Don't you have legs? You can fly or walk, but you are not allowed to touch our buses. If you have the ability, then kill me, from my dead body." Before the old man could finish his sentence, a huge head flew into the air. Chapter 517. This part of Ji Yuhan's history was always full of controversy, because this was the first time Ji Yuhan killed someone. He killed a human who was his own kind, and a human who was not a bad person. Regarding this point, the later generations would always be divided into two factions, and this debate would never end. Some people even wrote a 400,000-word-long research report to analyze this matter. Those who supported Gu Han believed that it was necessary for Gu Han to kill someone. It was precisely because he killed someone that the other employees were intimidated, and they successfully used the hover bus to rush to the core area, preventing the situation from worsening further. According to many analyses, if Gu Han had arrived more than 10 minutes later, the entire Yuzhang city would have ended up in a different state. Those who opposed Gu Han also had a very comprehensive argument. The person who was killed was innocent, but he was a poor person who was exploited by corrupt people. No matter which law it was impossible to judge that the old man should be deprived of his life. Gu Han had abused his private message, and he had placed his will above the law. It was a deprivation of the law, a blasphemy against the law, and a violation of the core concept of ruling the country by law. Gu Han should be judged for his crimes. To this, the supporters retorted, "Should Yuzhang City risk the destruction of Yuzhang City just to uphold the law?" The opponent replied disdainfully, "Isn't Yuzhang City still alive and well? It hasn't been destroyed yet, right?" In short, this became a matter that had been debated for hundreds of years without a conclusion. People who stood on different sides would say different things. This also became a huge black mark on Gu Han's reputation in the future. Those who opposed Gu Han constantly used it to attack Gu Han's character. Even the textbooks of later generations vaguely criticized Gu Han for not killing the old man. Of course, this was all after Gu Han left this world. When Gu Han was alive, absolutely no one dared to openly discuss this topic. Everyone agreed that what Gu Han did was right, and that it was necessary to protect Yuzhang City. No one knew what Gu Han was thinking when he killed the old man. We only knew that after the old man's head fell to the ground, all the people who tried to stop the swordsman took a dozen steps back in fear. They didn't dare to stand in front of Gu Han anymore. Witnessing all this, the sword bearers fell silent. The way they looked at Guhan also changed. They also hesitated and did not move. Your loved ones might die in every second you waste. Are you sure you want to stand here and waste your time? Seeing that the swordsman did not move, Ji Han could only coldly say such a sentence. Only then did the sword-bearers wake up from their stupor. They all boarded the hovering buses and drove them out of the hub. Come here. Guhan pointed at a trembling employee and said. The employee was shocked and thought that Guhan was going to kill him. He was so scared that he immediately knelt down and cried, "Don't kill me." He didn't dare to stop Master. "I won't kill you." Guhan walked over and grabbed the man's trembling wrist. Then, he tapped his personal terminal on the man's personal terminal. "This is my personal information. If I can survive this invasion, ask his family to come and find me. I will give them an explanation." After saying that, Ji Han strode out of the public transport hub, leaving behind a headless corpse and a group of mortals looking at each other in dismay. The streets of Yuzhong City were filled with ordinary people. They were all talking as they stared at the long line of buses and listened to the loudspeakers outside the buses. "It's dangerous outside. Please don't stay on the streets. Stay on the first floor and wait for the shelter to open." That was the message. The bus fleet was moving very fast. They ignored all traffic lights and madly headed in the direction of the core area. Even if the road was full of people, they did not hesitate to drive over. After all, the maglev flying cars could fly up to a distance of more than 3 meters. They could not hurt the pedestrians. They could only mess up the hair of the pedestrians. This was especially true for the hovercraft in the lead. It seemed to have a shield around it, and any hovercraft that got in its way would be knocked to the side of the road by the hovercraft bus. It didn't seem to care about the fact that there might be people in the vehicles, and the entire fleet of hovercrafts barged in and out of the way. It was simple and unreasonable to the extreme. However, except for those who were hit and cursed, the rest of the people who saw this scene calmed down. This meant that the sword-bearers had finally begun to move. Yuzhong City was no longer in a state of chaos. Ordinary people like them could be saved. The fleet rushed all the way to the outside of the core area. At this time, there were very few ordinary people in the periphery of the core area. This was because through the dimensional barrier, countless Yuan Ku could be seen attacking the dimensional barrier from the inside. Their attacks constantly knocked on the dimensional barrier, causing it to shake. As mentioned before, every base city had 2 layers of dimensional barrier. The last layer of dimensional barrier in the core area ensured that the main facilities in the core area could still be used to fight after the city was breached. Originally, the dimensional barrier in the core area was used to protect the core area. However, after the core area was breached from the inside, the barrier became a barrier to protect the ordinary areas from Yuan Ku attacks. No wonder the ordinary people were not affected even though Yuan Ku had already killed his way into the core area. It was hard to tell if this was a blessing or a curse. Unfortunately, because the core area had 2 layers of protection, all the main facilities, including the base station, the network center, the swordbearers service center, and other facilities were located in the core area. As a result, after the core area was breached, these facilities were destroyed immediately. More than half of Yuzhong City was paralyzed. Not only did they lose communication, they could not even open the shelters. However, the lucky ones were Yuzhong City's most valuable asset. There were more than 40 million people, and most of them were in the ordinary areas. They were not attacked by Yuan Ku and could still live freely. As long as there were ordinary people, Yuzhong City could complete the entire reconstruction in less than a year. This was a blessing in a misfortune. However, for the sword-bearers, their loved ones were in the core area. Now that Yuan Ku was attacking the dimensional barrier, could it be that the entire core area had completely fallen and there was no one left alive? Thinking of this, these sword-bearers couldn't help but want to rush into the dimensional barrier and fight Yuan Yang to the death with their sword ladies. Calm down, all of you. Listen to my orders. Guhan restrained the impulse of the sword-bearers in time. He turned his head and asked Yang Jiaohua, "Master Yang, where is the base station in the core area? We must repair the entire base station immediately." I believe that there must be many surviving swordbearers still fighting in the core area. We must contact them. I understand. Yang Jiahua projected her own map, and then marked a location with force. This is. Guhan looked at the location marked by Yang Jiahua and found that it was in the garbage area of the core area. How could such an important base station be set in the garbage area? Seeing the doubt in Guhan's eyes, Yang Jiahua immediately explained, "Sir Military Governor, I think even if we rush to the location of the base station, I'm afraid that the base station has been damaged beyond repair by Yuan Ku. So, we don't need to go to the base station at all. We just need to go here. When I was managing the information in the communications company, I knew that the base station in Yuzhong City was upgraded 5 years ago. The old base station was left unused in the garbage area. It was only because there were many precious materials in it that it was left there and not dismantled. As long as we find the base station, connect it to the power supply, and find a professional engineer to debug it, we should be able to use it again." "Great. That's great." Guhan held Yang Jiahua's hand tightly. "Master Yang, your information is worth 100,000 hero coins. I will remember your contribution." Guhan immediately issued a new order to all the captains. "Teams 1 to 10, release your swordbearers and form a fish scale formation. Eliminate all Yuan Ku at the entrance and pave the way for the army to enter the core area." "Yes, understood." Each team was composed of 20 swordbearers. 10 teams meant 200 swordbearers. 200 swordbearers. These swordbearers followed Guhan's orders and began to attack the core area's gate. There were more than 1,000 Yuan Ku attacking the dimensional barrier at the gate. From the looks of it, the number of Yuan Ku was 5 times that of the swordbearers. However, they were scattered in a straight line of nearly a kilometer and could not gather in a short period of time. However, the swordbearers had formed a formation in advance. They were using the fish scale formation, which was most suitable for quick combat. The swordbearers were like fish scales, passing through the dimensional barrier and concentrating their strength to attack more than 100 Yuan Ku near the gate. Often, 20 swordbearers attacked 1 Yuan Ku at the same time. Yuan Ku was instantly killed by the swordbearers. Not long after, the entire gate was cleared. Teams 11 to 30, attack from the west and block Yuan Ku's support. Teams 31 to 50, attack from the south and block Yuan Ku's attack. Teams 1 to 10, kill all Yuan Ku within a kilometer radius. Guhan's command was very methodical. In a short while, a large safe area was completely cleared. Then, Guhan led all the swordbearers into the core area. They stood in the safe area that had been cleared and was surrounded by everyone's swordbearers. Then, under Guhan's command, the swordbearers began to change their formation. Finally, they formed a standard rotation formation and began to quickly advance toward the garbage area. Chapter 518. The garbage area was not far from the gate. After all, the garbage had to be transported to the outside of the city through the gate for disposal, so the troops soon advanced to the garbage area. To Guhan's surprise, in a building near the garbage area, there were 500 or 600 Yuan Kus besieging the gate of the building. At the gate of the building, the swordbearers could be seen resisting the attack of Yuan Ku. "Lei Mu, the 1st to 40th squads are under your command. Just bring them to the garbage area safely. The rest of you, follow me to save them," Guhan said. Lei Mu was the famous swordbearer who questioned Guhan on the wall at the beginning. In the battle just now, Guhan found that Lei Mu's command was actually very methodical. His squad was also the one that killed the most enemies and had the fewest casualties. "Military Governor, it's better if we don't split up," Lei Mu said hesitantly. "I don't think those Yuan Kus will be able to break in for a while. It's better to concentrate on occupying the garbage area first. Don't worry, humans don't like garbage areas, and Yuan Kus don't like garbage areas either." Guhan had already seen Yuan Ku's hatred for garbage areas in Yeyang Fortress, so he said, "And I see that the footsteps of those sword maidens are turning illusory. I'm afraid that they have reached their limit. We can't lose any more precious compatriot." After that, Guhan directly gave the position of deputy commander to Lei Mu. After Lei Mu commanded the large troops to move to the garbage area, Guhan led the remaining people to attack the Yuan Kus besieging the building. There was nothing much to say about the process of the battle. Guhan ordered the team to form an arrow formation, and he himself was at the forefront. In the blink of an eye, Yuan Ku's formation was penetrated. When the sword-bearers in the building saw Guhan coming to support them, their morale was also high. They rushed out of the gate of the building and cooperated with Guhan to kill all the Yuan Kus besieging the building. Thank you, brothers. We thought we were going to die here. There were more than a dozen swordsmen in the building, and they were basically at the end of their rope. If it weren't for Guhan's arrival, the entire building would have been breached in no time. What's the situation inside the building? How many survivors are there? Guhan quickly asked the leader. There are still more than 500 people in the building, and they are all employees of the telecommunications company. There are only 500 people left in the entire Yuzhong Mobile Telecommunications Company. At this point, the sword wielder's face became gloomy. There should be more than 1,000 employees in Yuzhong Mobile's headquarters. Yang Jiaohua sent a message to Guhan through her personal terminal. No wonder the sword-bearers looked so pale. The number of casualties in the headquarters had exceeded half. Well, now is not the time to be sad about these things. We need to get out of here immediately. I will give you 5 minutes. You immediately organize the survivors to come out of the building. We will protect them and converge with the main force, Guhan said quickly. Understood. The sword-bearers immediately rushed back into the building to organize the survivors to leave the building. Guhan secretly rejoiced that he had made the right choice. He didn't expect this to be the headquarters of the mobile telecommunications company. It seemed that there was hope to restart the base station. Soon, all the survivors were organized and came out. They were surrounded by Guhan's more than 200 sword-bearers. Once again, they moved towards the garbage area. Along the way, Guhan also learned about the general situation from the sword-bearers in the core area. These sword-bearers were originally just playing games in their homes nearby. Suddenly, the game was disconnected. Because their homes were next to the telecommunications company, these sword-bearers came to the telecommunications company to inquire about the situation. As a result, when they asked at the front desk, they suddenly found that a large number of Yuan Ku had appeared in the core area and were killing crazily. These sword-bearers immediately began to rescue the nearby humans and finally concentrated in this building for defense. It was said that these Yuan Ku appeared 3 hours ago. These sword-bearers were also confused about the other situation. It was only when Guhan explained to them about the quantum teleportation array that they suddenly realized that it was an accident caused by the quantum teleportation array. Sir Military Governor, I am afraid there is a problem here. Hearing the narration of these sword-bearers, Yang Jiaohua hesitated for a moment and said to Guhan, Of course I know there is a problem here. I am afraid that Yuan Ku's spies have already infiltrated our internal department, Guhan said while gritting his teeth. From the narration of the sword-bearers just now, it can be known that they first discovered the abnormality because the network was disconnected. After the network was disconnected, these sword-bearers immediately left their homes. On the way to the telecommunications company, they did not see any trace of Yuan Ku. It was not until they arrived at the front desk that they saw traces of Yuan Ku. What did this mean? This meant that Yuan Ku destroyed the communication system in the core area at the first moment. It was not a coincidence that he destroyed the communication system after occupying the entire core area. So here was the question. These Yuan Ku, who had not even entered the gates of Yuzhong City, how did they know the location of the base station in the core area like the back of their hand and destroy the base station at the first moment? The base station was different from other places. Normally, the Sword Council would arrange a team of sword-bearers to guard the base station. The leader of the team would be a famous sword-level sword-bearer. If Yuan Ku had not deliberately launched a surprise attack on the base station at the first moment, how could he have destroyed the base station so quickly? This meant that Yuan Ku had fully grasped the overall situation of the core area. There must be a human spy acting as Yuan Ku's agent in the core area to support Yuan Ku's actions. This also explained why the manager of the quantum teleportation array in the core area did not immediately shut down the quantum teleportation array. The spy must have killed or tricked away the scientists and swordbearers in charge of the quantum teleportation array in advance. With just a few words from these few swordbearers, Guhan was able to analyze a lot of information. Who is this spy? Why did he betray humanity? Why? Guhan clenched his fists. He wanted to find the spy and tear him to pieces. How is it? Can this old base station be used? Ji Han's team reunited with the main force in the garbage area, and the old base station was also found again. After 5 years, the old base station, which no one had carried out daily maintenance, had become rusty. Just from its appearance, it naturally gave people a feeling that it was not very useful. How would we know? Lei Mu and the other swordbearers looked at each other. They did not study communication, nor were they engineers. How would they know if this base station could be used or not? Let me do it. I dismantled this base station with my own hands. An old man suddenly walked over. He was the survivor that Guhan had just rescued from the building. It seemed that Guhan's decision was correct. Otherwise, there would not be anyone who could debug the base station now. Thank you for your hard work, sir. If you need anything, please let me know immediately. You must repair the entire base station as soon as possible, Guhan said excitedly as he held the old man's hand. It's not hard work. After all, I have been doing this all my life. However, there is one thing. The base station needs electricity to start up. I don't know if you can find a way to connect a 1,000,000-volt high-voltage wire. Otherwise, even if there is a base station, it will not be able to start up, the old man said helplessly. High-voltage wire? Guhan thought for a while. Originally, the most convenient way was to dig up the ground nearby, take out the buried high-voltage cable, and connect it in the middle. However, he had asked the swordbearers earlier. At this time, the core area's electricity had been completely cut off, so it was naturally impossible to directly connect the nearby underground cable. Must it be a 1,000,000-volt high-voltage line? Guhan frowned and asked. Now that the line could not be used, they could only rely on the core area's generator. However, a 1,000,000-volt generator was rare in the entire core area. Probably only the power plant would have such a power generator. Yes, the base station was developed based on quantum communication. It requires an extremely high voltage current to make the entire base station work. Our base station is directly connected to a special line from the power plant. Otherwise, ordinary lines wouldn't be able to carry it. The old man sighed. However, Guhan was not a god. He could not conjure a 1,000,000-volt generator. It seemed that it would be impossible to restore communication in a short period of time. At this time, for Guhan, there was a very urgent matter that needed to be done. It was to find a way to activate Yuzhong City's refuge system so that everyone could enter the underground shelter through the refuge system. Moreover, as long as the people in the core area hid in their homes, he believed that Yuan Ku would not be able to kill them in a short period of time. Now, there should be a large number of people in the core area hiding in their homes. Only by activating the refuge system in the core area would these people have a higher chance of survival. Therefore, Guhan decided to leave the base station first, then lead the troops to the refuge control center to find a way to restart the refuge system. Just as Guhan was about to announce his decision, suddenly, Yang Jiahua gave Guhan a big surprise. Sir Military Governor, in fact, there should be a 1,000,000-volt power generation system nearby, Yang Jiahua said with a bitter smile. What? Say it again. Guhan raised his voice and asked incredulously. This Yang Jiahua was really a god. She actually knew everything. It's true. There is a 1,000,000-volt power generation system in Yangming High School. When Yang Jiahua said this news, her expression was very strange. Are you kidding? Why would a middle school need a 1,000,000-volt power generation system? Not only did Guhan not believe it, but the other swordbearers also did not believe it. That's right. Why would a middle school need a 1,000,000-volt power generation system? Did they have nothing better to do? Schools always need money, Yang Jiahua said bitterly. Chapter 519. Yangming High School was originally just a relatively ordinary high school in the core area of Yuzhong City. Like the other high schools, it only accepted children from the core area. Over 100 years had passed uneventfully, and there had never been any big news. However, ever since the new principal took office, he adhered to the idea that all people were equal, and suddenly decided to enroll 500 students from the ordinary area. This was quite a bold move. It was said that the principal spoke passionately for an hour at the general meeting of the council and won the applause of all the council members. Then, he used Yangming High School as a pilot to promote the concept of education without discrimination. It sounded like a very good thing. Enrolling 500 ordinary students from the ordinary area into the school would allow the children from the ordinary area and the core area to enjoy the same educational environment. It would ease the gap and division between the ordinary area and the core area. The children would not be treated separately just because their parents were not citizens of the core area. How about it? Didn't it sound like a very good idea? This principal was simply a Virgin Mary principal with a strong sense of social responsibility. Anyway, this principal relied on this plan to gain enough political capital and fame. Now, he had become the Minister of Education of the Council, managing the education work of the entire Yuzhong City. As the principal's greatest political achievement, this plan for education without discrimination had been continued in Yangming High School. It was just that in the first few years of the plan, children with potential from the ordinary area were selected to enroll. However, in recent years, the plan had completely changed. It had become a competition of money, sponsorship fees, and borrowing fees. Everyone knew what sponsorship fees and borrowing fees were from 1,000 years ago. There was no need for further explanation. Anyway, these two fees had risen from a symbolic 10,000 renminbi a year in the first year to a terrifying 1 million renminbi a year. And looking at the situation, this fee would rise greatly in the future. Even though the cost was so high, the rich people in the ordinary districts still flocked to Yangming High School. They were willing to sell everything they had to send their children there. Once they entered the school in the core zone, they would be able to receive better education. Most importantly, they would be able to become companions and friends with the children in the core zone. They might even be able to marry the son or daughter of a senior swordsman. That way, once the level of the in-laws swordsman increased, they would be able to obtain their citizenship quota and enter the core zone to become a well-protected citizen. It was different from the citizenship that cost 1.2 million renminbi to buy. That citizenship only allowed you to live in the core area, but it did not give you the status you deserved in the core area. Only by becoming a relative of the swordsman could you get the respect of the core area and live a dignified life. Therefore, everyone could imagine how popular these 500 places were. Every year, Yangming High School could earn hundreds of millions of extra fees through these 500 places. Half of these fees had to be handed over to the Ministry of Education and placed in the small treasury of the Ministry of Education. The other half was at the school's disposal. Therefore, Yangming High School had been building new teaching facilities and teaching buildings almost every year for more than a decade. It seemed that the money was really used for the school's education, but in fact, 10 cubic meters of dimensional crystal powder used for construction actually cost 10 million renminbi to buy. If one randomly searched for a gold medal seller on Taobao, they would buy the same additive powder for less than 800,000 renminbi. It could be seen that there was something fishy about it. Later, when there were enough teaching buildings built, there was no reason to build more. Therefore, they began to purchase all kinds of inexplicable things called teaching equipment. For example, this 1 million volt generator, which Yangming High School had probably never used until now. They spent a total of 50 million yuan to purchase it. God, it was only 500,000 yuan on Taobao, and it even included shipping. This was what Yang Jiao explained to Guhan on the way. Guhan did not have any sense of justice. He was not interested and did not have the time to blame these education officials because it could not solve any problems. The most important thing at the moment was to restore the core area's communication function. This was the most important thing. Guhan seemed to be thanking the principal. Without his godlike corruption, maybe more people in the core area would have died. Yangming High School was not far from the garbage area. It only took Guhan about 10 minutes to lead the large team to Yangming High School. Along the way, they killed all the Yuan Ku they encountered on the way and rescued 5 strongholds that were surrounded by Yuan Ku. A total of more than 1,800 ordinary people were protected by Guhan, and about 80 sword-bearers joined Guhan's team. They were organized by Guhan into teams 51 to 54. Guhan now had more than 1,800 sword-bearers under his command. When Guhan led the team to Yangming High School, something that surprised Guhan even more happened. Yangming High School was not completely defended. There were more than 100 sword-bearers guarding the entrances of Yangming High School, blocking the siege of Yuan-ku. Thanks to the principal's large-scale construction, he actually built a wall that was more than 10 meters high for Yangming High School. The principal's reason was that he did not allow students to climb the wall to play truant during school hours, but the actual reason was, of course, that the construction cost was about 10 times more. It was also because of the existence of these walls that only more than 100 sword-bearers could rely on the school gate to block the attack of Yuan-ku. Seeing this situation, Guhan naturally did not say anything. He led his team to clean up the siege of Yuan-ku, and then led the team directly into Yangming High School. Great, someone finally came to save us. Sir, you came just in time. On behalf of thousands of teachers and students in the school, I thank you, sir. As soon as the team led by Guhan entered Yangming Fortress, a middle-aged man dressed in a gentle and elegant manner came over. He held Guhan's hand tightly and thanked Guhan with all his might. If he did not know this principal's style from young Jiahua's mouth, Guhan would really think that this was a good principal. I don't want to hear your nonsense. Before I ask you, shut your mouth, Guhan said to the principal with a bad expression. The principal was embarrassed for a while, but he immediately shut his mouth very sensibly. There was no unhappy expression on his face. It seemed that there was a reason why he could become the principal of the school and the right-hand man of the Minister of Education and be placed in such an important position. You have a good place here. Our sword committee will immediately use your school district as a temporary battle command center. Do you have any objections? Yangming High School was surrounded by walls on all sides. There were only a few gates for entry and exit. They only needed to expend a small number of troops to guard the gate. Unless a high-grade Yuanzhong came, these Yuanzhong who weren't even at the dragon level wouldn't be able to break into Yangming High School in a short period of time. This naturally became the best temporary base. What's more, Guhan brought almost 2,000 survivors. These survivors naturally could not move with the main force. The best way was to put them in Yangming High School for protection. Yangming High School was large enough to accommodate 100,000 people. Although Guhan asked if the principal had any objections, in fact, he would not listen to the principal's opinion. Would Guhan move to another place if the principal had any objections? Therefore, the principal was very tactful. He immediately expressed that not only did he not have any objections, but the entire school's 5,000 to 6,000 teachers and students would become the support of the army. Even if they had to go out and fight with Yuan-ku, they would not be afraid. Guhan waved his hand and signaled for the principal to stop his long speech. He then directly asked the most important question. Mr. Principal, I heard that you have a 1,000,000-volt generator here. Is it still here? Generator? The principal was stunned for a moment. How can there be a generator in my school? And a 1,000,000-volt generator at that? This is impossible. We are a school. How can we use such a thing? No. Guhan's face turned cold. Looking at the principal's expression, it did not seem like he was lying. Guhan turned to look at Yang Jiahua. Yang Jiahua touched her neck, indicating that she was using her head to guarantee that there was indeed a generator in the school. Mr. Principal, are you sure that there is no 1,000,000-volt generator in your school? Guhan glared at the principal fiercely. I will send people to search the entire school now. If I find the generator, I will directly behead you for the crime of concealing military intelligence. And your relatives behind you, all of them will be implicated. They will all be sent to the fields outside the city. Mr. Principal, you have to think carefully. Behead. 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 The principal could not help but shiver. At this time, a guy with the same temperament as him hurriedly came to the principal's side and whispered a few words in his ear. The principal suddenly felt like his whole body was about to collapse. The person who whispered was none other than the principal's brother-in-law. He was currently in charge of managing the school's logistics. He had just secretly told the principal that they had indeed bought a 1,000,000-volt generator. This was operated by his sister, the principal's wife. Because he did not want to distract the principal, he did not tell the principal. This yellow-faced woman, she's trying to kill me. The principal was so angry that he scolded his wife in his heart. But I have clearly given my money to my wife for safekeeping. She does not lack money to spend. Why would she use my brother-in-law to make money behind my back? Forget it, forget it. Right now, it is more important to save my own life. The principal immediately replied with a charming smile. Sir, there is a mistake, a mistake. There is indeed a 1,000,000-volt generator in our school. You do not know, recently we have frequent power outages here. The students cannot even take a hot bath. So the logistics department bought a generator. They just bought it and did not inform me, so I did not know about this. Oh yes, I have the receipt. I have the receipt. The principal said loudly. Damn the receipt. Chapter 520. Guhan naturally didn't care about the damn invoice. After he asked the principal about the location of the 1,000,000-volt generator, he ran to the place where the generator was stored with the old employee who had just debugged the base station. The brother-in-law of the principal was also a talent. He actually placed the generator in the museum, saying that it had become a showcase of Yuzhang industry. However, to Guhan's surprise, this generator was unexpectedly small. It was only the size of a refrigerator. It was completely different from the generator that Guhan remembered, which had a shaft that occupied 1 or 2 basketball courts. No wonder it was temporarily placed in this nuisance middle school museum. Several sword wielders immediately smashed the window of the generator. Guhan also placed the previous base station next to the generator. The old employee walked around the generator and nodded. This generator is indeed a 1,000,000-volt, but it is not a conventional fuel generator. It is the latest dimensional crystal generator. It can convert the energy in the dimensional crystal into electricity, so this generator can be made so small. Do you need a dimensional crystal? What level of dimensional crystal do you need? Guhan knew that it was time for him to bleed again. Sure enough, the old employee told Guhan that if he wanted to use this generator, he needed a dimensional crystal above the Marquis grade. Guhan didn't have anything to say. He directly took out an Earl from his dimensional pocket and put it in the refrigerator. Immediately, the refrigerator's display lit up. The old employee operated on the refrigerator and then directly connected it to the base station with a wire. When the base station was powered on, the console that had not worked for a long time also lit up again. How is it? Can this base station be restored? Guhan asked with some excitement. Not yet. The old employee flipped through all kinds of data on the console, then knocked on the outside of the base station for a while. He shook his head and said, the electronic equipment inside should have been flooded, causing some lines to short-circuit. We must dismantle the base station to repair it. How long will it take? Guhan asked quickly. I don't know. It depends on the damage inside. If I'm lucky, it will only take 10 minutes to repair it. If I'm unlucky, it may take a few days, the old employee said hesitantly. I don't have a few days to waste. You only have 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, you must restore this base station. Every second you delay, a human will die because of you. Do you understand? Guhan gritted his teeth and threatened. I need help. The old employee raised his head. I can't do it alone. I need someone to help me. It's best if it's someone who was rescued with me. There are a lot of skilled repairmen among them. With their help, I might be able to do it faster. Very good. Team 54, immediately take this master to the people he wants. Bring all the people he wants here. Bring them here. Those who disobey will be beheaded on the spot. No mercy. Guhan gave such a harsh order. The 20 sword-bearers of Team 10 looked at each other and left with the old employee. The restoration of the base station was hindered. It seemed that the idea of restoring communication immediately would not work for the time being. They had to draw up a new battle plan. They could not wait here for the base station to be repaired. They had to do something. Guhan pondered for a while looking at the core area map in his hand. Then, he connected all the captain's communications and pulled them into a communication conference room. Everyone, the restoration of the base station still needs time, but we can't wait any longer. There are 12 residential areas in the entire core area. The ones closest to our Yangming High School are Mount Taishan, Mount Huangshan, and Mount Amei. I order that every 12 teams form a brigade according to the sequence. They will be led by Wan Tong, Yu Minute, and Zhong Rui respectively. They will attack the 3 residential areas of Mount Taishan, Mount Huangshan, and Mount Amei. Kill all the Yuan Ku in the residential areas. At the same time, search for survivors in the residential areas. If you find any survivors, immediately protect them and bring them back to Yangming High School. Do you understand? Wan Tong, Yu Minute, and Zhong Rui were the commanders that Guhan had found. With their command, the brigade would be able to complete the mission smoothly. Yes. Wan Tong and Yu Minute immediately agreed. However, Zhong Rui hesitated for a while. Sir, can I go to Mount Lushan? I promise I will definitely complete the search and rescue mission in Mount Lushan. Mount Lushan. Guhan was silent for a while. Zhong Rui, if I'm not wrong, your home is in Mount Lushan, right? Yes, Sir Military Governor. Zhong Rui's home is there. My lovely 10-year-old daughter is there too. My beloved wife is there too. I must go and save them. Zhong Rui was so emotional that he was about to explode. I understand your situation, but I must tell you that you can't. Guhan said coldly. Mount Lushan is 15 kilometers away from us. If you want to go to Mount Lushan, you must pass through the CBD Commercial Street and the Swordsman Service Center. I believe that is where most Yuan Ku gathers. If you bring your team there, you will be courting death. I will not allow that to happen. Don't even think about it, do you understand? Then I won't bring anyone there. I'll go alone. Zhong Rui roared. Zhong Rui, calm down. Sir Military Governor is right. If we go to Mount Lushan now, we will be courting death. Zhong Rui, if you can't calm down, I can help you. Wan Tong and Yu Minute tried to persuade him. Screw you. I'm going to save my own people. It's none of your business. Zhong Rui was about to go crazy. He could not accept not being able to save his family at the first opportunity. So what if your home is in Mount Lushan? Do you know which neighborhood my home is in? Guhan's voice was cold. My home is in Sankingshan, which is 3 kilometers away from your Mount Lushan. Do you think I should lead all my brothers to Sankingshan? Zhong Rui stopped talking. Indeed, he had nothing to say when faced with Guhan, who lived in Sankingshan. I hereby announce that Zhong Rui is relieved of his duties as captain and squad leader. Wenjia will take over as captain, and the vice-captain of Zhong Rui's squad will take over as captain. Zhong Rui, if you want to go with everyone, then be a soldier. If you don't want to, then get out of here. Go wherever you want to die. I won't stop you. Choose one. I'm ashamed. I'm willing to be a soldier. Zhong Rui finally came to his senses and did not take the wrong step. Lei Mu, you're the vice-captain. You're responsible for leading the rest of the sword-bearers in Yangming Fortress. Contact the 3 squads here. If there's any danger, come to their aid. Guhan ordered. Lei Mu understands. I promise I'll do it. Wait, Sir Military Governor, I'm here to coordinate. What about you, sir? What are you doing, sir? Lei Mu suddenly remembered that Guhan had assigned almost all the tasks. What should he go to do? I'm going to the emergency response center, Guhan said calmly. I have to open the evacuation system. Only then can the survivors in the other neighborhoods survive. Otherwise, my family, Zhong Rui's family, and more family members. Maybe if we open the evacuation system in time, they won't die. Understood. Sir, Which squads are you going to bring? Lei Mu asked casually. Not only will I bring any squads. Guhan's words were like a bolt from the blue that struck everyone's ears. No, sir, it's too dangerous for you to go alone. Sir, how can you make it to the emergency response center alone? It's better to bring 10 squads. Lei Mu and the others tried to persuade him. After listening to their advice, Guhan replied calmly, "Thank you for your concern, but the emergency response center is at the Swordbearers Service Center. It's the area that Yuan Ku occupied first, so it's definitely full of Yuan Ku. There might even be Nether and Meteor Yuan Ku there. If that happens, let alone 10 squads, even 100 squads might be trapped there. I can't take the risk." Guhan did not respond. "Sir Military Governor?" Lei Mu and the others shouted in panic. In the end, they discovered that Guhan had already left the communication conference. A minute later, the swordbearers guarding the gate reported that Guhan had left the gate. As for where he went, no one knew. "Sir Military Governor." Lei and the others were so touched that they shouted Guhan's name. In their eyes, Guhan probably did not plan to come back alive after going to the Swordbearers Service Center. Of course, Jiyu Han was not planning to go to the Swordsman Service Center to die. His actions just now were mostly an act, and after his righteous performance, it would definitely be widely spread among all the squad leaders. His heroic act of risking his life would also be spread, and this would be extremely beneficial to Jiyu Han's path to the throne. At the very least, when he started to build his own army, there would not be a situation where there would be no one willing to enlist. After the performance, Guhan also brought out the 3 universe rank Yuan Ku who had barged into the Swordbearers Service Center: Bastet, Iceyes, and Anubis. These 3 guys had been hiding in Guhan's dimensional pocket. He only let them out after they complained for days. As mentioned before, the dimensional wall could block all Yuan Ku, including Yuan Ku hiding in the dimensional pocket. However, there were always accidents, and this was no exception. For example, Jiyu Jin Jendi had brought a few of his Yuan Ku and freelancer friends into Yangjing headquarter city. The dimensional wall did not work at all. This was Jendi's privilege. The Emperor's sword could forcefully open a gap in the dimensional wall and let Yuan Ku enter. However, this was only limited to the Emperor's sword. If it was a flood level or desolation level Yuan Ku, it would not be able to open a gap. Guhan let the Emperor's sword and the 3 Yuan Ku stay in the same dimensional pocket. The dimensional wall naturally opened a gap, and the 3 universe rank Yuan Ku followed them in. With these 3 universe ranks by Guhan's side, even if Loki came, Guhan was confident that he could fight him. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.